Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, happy Friday, everyone. We did it. We made it through another week, and now it's time to kick up our feet, have a couple of drinks, and relax doing one of our favorite activities, which is happy hour. I don't know that happy hour is actually one of our favorite activities, maybe one of our more masochistic activities. It's kind of a nice little intro if you're just getting familiarized with my socialism content, and maybe you've come to one or two socialism Saturdays, or even you caught yesterday's stream where we were really trying to understand what exactly the socialists were saying. This happy hour is kind of an introduction. It is a little bit of a lighter load than full hardcore socialism. Yes, Lady Hawk, yesterday's commie stream, that was next level. So this one is probably going to be a little... I think I just saw a spider on my wall. I'm not pleased about that. But that's a different problem for later. It's on the other side of the room. It's okay. Just as long as it stays over as long as we have our own... The spider and I have our own separate areas at the moment. I'll have to yell for my husband to come kill it in a little bit. Anyway, on happy hour, we watch woke training in its full form. It's like one step down from socialism. So if you're not quite at the socialism bandwagon yet, this is going to be like your nice introduction. And guys, I'm going to be honest, we may do a little bit of a marathon today. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to see how I feel about it. But this stream could conceivably be the longest happy hour that I have ever done. I don't know how many of you will stick with me through the whole thing. I don't know if we're going to get through it all, but allow me to explain. I have discovered on the YouTube page for the University of Southern Indiana, they have a 3-part lecture series from about a year ago. And this is actually, it's on the University of Southern Indiana liberal arts page. This is an official college website. We have a 3-part lecture series about understanding queer theory. And originally I was just going to watch the first one. And I was like, that's 55 minutes of queer theory. That's probably enough. But no. Then I went and searched and I found a part 2, queer studies, liberatory education, and creative praxis. Where does the word liberatory come from? When we hear the word liberatory, what does that mean to us? That's part 2. And then part 3, somewhere over the rainbow, exploring queer in pop culture. So I would very minimally like to get through lecture 1 and lecture 2 today. All right? Yes, exactly. But liberate us from capitalism. Anytime you hear the word liberatory, that's going to be a socialist word. As in, liberate us from capitalism. Exactly correct. Bingo, we definitely do need bingo. I'll get that pulled up for you right now. Sorry about that. I always forget bingo lately, and you guys are always so good about reminding me. So I would very minimally like to get through part 1 and part 2 of the lecture series today. But if we're feeling saucy, if we're feeling like this is crazy content and we want to keep going, there's a part 3 waiting around in the wings just in case. I'm not saying it's guaranteed or anything, but we've got a good series in front of us today. So guys, that is what we're doing. And again, let me show you the YouTube page for this. I'm not joking about this. Linking formal inquiry with self-discovery, we strive to ignite intellectual curiosity and a passion for lifelong learning. The college includes the departments of art and design, communications, criminal justice, English, history, performing arts, philosophy, political science, etc., etc., etc. This is quite literally the official college YouTube channel with the official college queer studies lectures. You're welcome. No big deal. So it's going to be a great day, guys. That's what we're watching on Happy Hour for today. Now, Happy Hour, as you know, we do watch I firmly believe, I say this all the time, but I firmly believe that people who come to Happy Hour and then Socialism Saturday on the regular, you guys know more about what's going on the woke left than like anyone else on the internet. I really do believe that. You know more than the pundits, you know more than the commentators, you know more than the journalists, you know more than the people who pretend to be experts in this stuff all day every day, because I'm almost positive about this. And honestly, correct me if I am wrong. If someone wants to disprove my theory, then I would love to hear it, truly. I really believe that we're like the only people on the internet that are actually watching the full form content. Like, we're doing these deep dives on like multiple times a week. And we've been doing this for 2 years now, over 2 years. And so we're the only people on the internet who are really listening to these people from start to finish and dissecting every single thing that they're saying to understand exactly what they mean, where they're coming from, what the language is, etc., etc., etc. So when I say you guys know more about the woke left than everyone else, it's because you're putting more work in than anyone else. And it's a little scary if we think about it, that we know more than so many other people, but let's not think about that right now. We've got other stuff to do today. Let's see. You know, people keep complaining about the Biden ads on my channel. Just so we're all clear, guys, I don't control the ads on my channel. Like, someone was actually yelling at me. Someone on like the Trump town hall video, they're like, "Why are they showing Biden ads on your channel, Carlin?" And I was like, what do you want me to do about it? I don't control YouTube. I mean, if Joe Biden wants to give me money, all the better, but I'll take Joe Biden's money and then tell people not to vote for him. I'm perfectly happy with that, guys. Randy says, new here, but you're definitely the only channel I know of that does this. Love a good deep dive. Well, welcome, Randy. I'm really glad that you're here. Guys, of course, this is Happy Hour, so we do have a couple orders of business that we need to tend to before we get started. Let's see, where do I want to start today? Let's start with bingo cards. We'll do gender queer bingo today. Of course, let me pop this into the chat. bingo is just something that's fun to kind of pass the time. It's not a prize or anything, but there's your genderqueer bingo card. Everyone gets a different bingo card. You just generate card. Every card is unique, and then you get a free square in the middle, and then we're go for lines or we're going for corners. And if you want to do this little doohickey around the center, like that's fine too, man. Whatever style bingo you want to do, as long as it's like actually a legit style of bingo, not just something you're making up. We do the honor system here, so you can do whatever style of bingo you want to do. But if you get a bingo, shout out bingo in the chat. We will give you a hearty round of applause and a bunch of congratulations. And but you won't win anything. It's just like for the honor system. And then we'll go for blackout bingo after that. So there are our bingo cards. I do hope you enjoy that. A couple announcements in that, let's see, this tomorrow for my supporter community, so people who are paying supporters on the YouTube channel. I'll do this for channel members. I'll also do it for people who are in my Patreon, people who are in my locals, and people, of course, who are paying supporters on my Substack. You guys are all going to be invited to our monthly Bitchcraft call. Bitchcraft is an open Zoom call where we bitch and we craft. All crafts are welcome. You can even crochet, even though knitting is the far most superior craft of all crafts, of course. But you can crochet, you can quilt, you can sew, you can color, you can draw, you can clean your gun, you can fold your laundry. You can just come and hang out if you want to. All that's fine with me. But we will be gathering at 3 p.m. tomorrow for our monthly Bitchcraft call. It's usually just a great time just to chill, hang out, like shoot the shit, all that good stuff. So if you are a supporter on any of those networks, I will be sending out the link tomorrow, except if you're a supporter on my Substack. Because if you are a supporter on my Substack, what I need you to do is to go to the last edition of the Unwoke Roundup email. I added this. So if you've already checked this, I had to add it today because I forgot about it when I sent out the email, but I can update it. It's okay. Goddamn right, I'm a knitting supremacist. But if you head over to my Substack, carlin.substack.com, the link for the Bitchcraft tomorrow is in this email in the supporter perk section. For the rest of the platforms, I will be sending it out tomorrow. So if you're on locals, if you're on Patreon, if you're on a YouTube community member, I will be posting the link tomorrow prior to the call so that everyone can join and we can all hang out and it'll all be good. Of course, too, on Sunday, I don't have a slide for this, but on Sunday, we're doing movie night. And guys, guess what we're watching for movie night this week? Actually, let me just pull it up. I'm just going to pull it. I don't have anything prepared, but I'm going to pull up the movie poster. Guess what we're watching this is one of my movies. I'm so excited about it. I picked it out. I'm very proud of myself. We are going to be watching the cult classic. If I can pull it up, if my computer wants to cooperate. Open image. There we go. We are watching the cult classic, the amazing, the enduring, the unbeatable, the penultimate cult classic, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. This is one of my favorite all-time movies. I picked it out for my month of narcissism, and then we had to shuffle some stuff around just because. And so now we're watching it on Sunday night at 8 p.m. in my supporter Discord. If you have never seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space before, Jennifer, then you want to come and join us because it is honestly the best. It has the best soundtrack. It is so good. It really holds up even to this day. Yeah, see, lots of people saying they love this movie because it's the best, Jennifer. Jennifer doesn't want to watch it. Jennifer runs movie night. She was really fighting with me about picking this movie. So we do movie night in my supporter Discord every Sunday at 8 p.m. And of course, this is the most amazing movie night that we're gonna have all year. But all the other movie nights are great as well. Last week we watched Star Wars. We watch like different things every single week. We do movie trivia. We do all sorts of things. Fire Carol, you got to come join us in the supporter Discord then. How do you get access to the supporter Discord? Well, any number of ways, really, but the very best way is by becoming a supporter on my Substack for $5 a month, $50 a year. This is my home base for my content. From now on. Now, of course, if you want to become a supporter on Locals or Patreon or even become a member of this here YouTube channel, you will still get access to the supporter Discord. And of course, I appreciate your support on whichever platform is your favorite. I'm just trying to encourage as many people as possible to direct their support to my Substack. And the reason for that is purely selfish. It is. Because when I hit 1,000 paid supporters, I get a new check mark on Substack because the way that Substack does verification is that it's based on your paid supporters, which I actually think is the most fair way to do verification. I currently have a let me see. See, it doesn't show it on here anymore. There it is. I currently have a white check mark with an orange check. Now that's pretty good. I have hundreds of paid subscribers on Substack, and I'm grateful for every single one of you, of course. But when I hit 1,000 paid supporters, that check mark changes color. And, I like a good status symbol as much as the next person. Also, I do believe that Substack is just going to be my home base for the foreseeable future. I love Substack. It is a website that I'm really investing all of my energy into, and all of my content and stuff like that. And so that is the check mark is kind of like a vanity exercise, and I understand that, but I really want that orange check mark. I really, really do. And so if you guys could help me out by becoming a supporter on my Substack, $5 a month, $50 a year, that would be great. I am delivering you the most dystopian content that you will find on the internet, but always, of course, providing receipts. So I'm not making stuff up. I'm not exaggerating. I am showing you exactly what's going on. And the article I posted last night is going to blow your mind. Guys, there is a queer math camp. This is real. And you'll be able to see some of what I'm talking about. This is a camp for queer mathematics, even if the students aren't out to their parents yet. It's a free camp. And in the queer math camp, they're not teaching math. It actually says on their website that they're not teaching math in the queer math camp. And they're definitely not grooming people. Absolutely not. They seem to think that queer people just have a secret kind of math that only queer people know. And I've got some more information about that too. I did a little preview post and then I put the rest of it behind a paywall because that's the way it works now. But yeah, you can go and read on the Substack about the queer math camp. I also do have an article in the works about that crazy equity conference. By the way, I've got good news about that crazy equity conference. We're going to discuss it in the Discord. I'm not going to do it publicly, but I've got good news about that equity conference. You guys aren't going to believe this. Anyway, I've got another article in the works right now talking about that crazy woke equity conference that we looked at the other day. And really, what I'm doing is I'm investigating all the different presenters from the crazy woke equity conference. So lots of stuff going on in the Substack, and it is, again, the very best place to support my work. That is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. But like, never a day goes by without some crazy story coming up. I seriously have a list of like 5 different stories that I want to cover like this week, like maybe even working on it a little bit more later tonight after I've had several drinks. But that's the way it go, guys. And I hope you'll consider joining me as a supporter, and looking forward to seeing you guys for Bitchcraft and then movie night on Sunday. Yes, but that's not all, because this is our amazing month of socialism. So it looks like we will have 2 different socialism streams this weekend. Of course, we do have Socialism Saturday, and I don't exactly know what we're watching for Socialism Saturday yet, but I'm kind of thinking this. This is from our old friends at Haymarket Books, which is the socialist book publisher. We love Haymarket Books, mad respect. Haymarket Books recently did this live stream about organizing for liberation, so we can learn how the socialists are organizing. I thought that would be a pretty good selection. I will finalize the selection for Socialism Saturday tomorrow, which is a socialism presentation at 6 p.m. Eastern time, so we'll do that. But then, of course, it's Red May. And we love you, Red May. We really do. And Red May on Sunday is having a session at 2 p.m. So we're going to do a Sunday special, I think. And it's called We Have Never Been Post-Industrial. And I've seen Wendy Liu running around at a whole bunch of different places on like Twitter and stuff. And so she's a crazy socialist. And so I thought that this would be an interesting one to stream. So that's going to be on Sunday at 2 p.m. because during the month of Red May, because this socialist organization in Seattle is providing us with so much other socialist content, we're going to watch it live. And, we can't let Red May down, guys, because we are the only audience that Red May has. We watched that stream yesterday, and I'm fairly certain like 90% of Red May's live audience actually came from me. So you're welcome, Red May, for that. So we can't let them down. Red May's not letting us down. We got to show up for Red May. And so that'll be a Sunday special, Sunday at 2 p.m. Again, guys, keep your eye on the channel, and I will send out announcements and things for the streams that we're going to do. AD says, why does it seem there is always a contradiction insofar as people who adhere to those critical XYZ theories deny any universality to when in practice they do? Because they like it's like because they don't care about logic and reason. This is the thing. Do not expect the woke left to care about logic and reason, because they don't. They will always opt for the answer that is the most beneficial to them at any given point. That is one of the things we know about them. That is why you can never expect them to behave logically. You always have to expect them to behave in the way that is going to gain them the most power. That's it. That's all they care about, AD. But I do appreciate the super chat. All right, guys, I have one more order of business before we get started for today. So how do you catch a clown and pin it down? You don't? I don't know the answer to that, AD. Is that a riddle? A riddle wrapped in a mystery? Thank you for the super chat. Yes, exactly. Logic equals whiteness equals capitalism. Exactly. All right, guys, we do have one more order of business because it is happy hour. I need a beer. I've got some good choices today. Let me show you. The tradition of happy hour is that I show you 4 options for beer or other assorted beverages, and you guys get to vote on which one I drink first. Okay, let me get my stuff out of my cooler. Hang on. All right, let's see. I've got a little bit of an eclectic selection today. Let me see. All right, the first thing we have isn't actually a beer. It's a cider. This is a Carlson Orchards Shandy Stand Raspberry Cider. And it says a new twist on our summer cider shandy. And this is, if you're going to listen to me on which one you vote for, I'd like to start with this. I'm just saying, I'm not going to influence your vote or anything, but this is the one I want to start with. To give our summer shandy stand hard cider a bit of a twist, we've added a healthy splash of raspberry juice. Every bit as refreshing as the original shandy, but with a hint of plump, ripe summer raspberries. Lively, not too sweet, and delicious. So raspberry cider is going to be our first option for today. The next one, I don't know about this one. I'm going to be honest. This is a bit of a risk for me because I do not like IPAs. I do not like IPAs. But you know what I do like? Horchata. And, I was kind of in a rush, and I didn't actually, I thought it said pale ale when I took it out of the refrigerator. And then I looked when I got home and it says India Pale Ale, and I was like, God damn it. So this is a little bit of a risk. I don't know about this one. I might give this one to Victor to drink later. But it's called Kickin' Knowledge, and it is a milkshake beer, which means it has lactose in it. And it is an IPA brewed with vanilla, coconut, lactose, and cinnamon. And it is a horchata style, and I do like horchata, so it might turn out okay. We'll have to see. That's option number 2. Our last couple of options are actually some stouts, and I'm actually really excited about this next one because does anyone like Boston cream donuts? I haven't had or Boston cream pie. Like, I haven't had a good Boston cream pie in years, although Victor and I have stayed at the hotel in Boston where Boston cream pie was actually invented. It's the Omni Parker. It is beautiful. If you ever come to Boston, go stay at the Omni Parker. It's in a great location. The hotel is just gorgeous. And they invented Boston cream pie, which is always good. But I do have from Lord Hobo, Kane's Donuts, a Boston cream donut white stout with lactose cocoa nips, coffee beans, vanilla extract, and natural flavors. And it does have some writing on it, but it's really hard to read. And so I'm not going to read the writing. But Boston cream stout is going to be our third option for today. And then our last one is going to be another stout, and it's called Mochaccino. And this is a blonde milk stout with chocolate, coffee, vanilla, and milk sugar. And that's it. So those are our options, guys. We've got raspberry cider. We've got horchata IPA. we've got Boston Cream Stout, and we've got Mochaccino. And I'm putting the poll in the chat now. Let me know which one you want me to start with, and I will follow your vote no matter what it is. And while you're voting, let me just get the sound set up so we can get this party started. I hope you're all having a wonderful Friday. I hope you've all had a great week. If you're drinking something fun, let us know what you're drinking in the chat. Let me see what's going on. And while people are voting, just a nice little hi over to, oh, please don't make me drink the horchata. Come on. Hi to everyone watching on Odyssey, on Rockfin, and on Rumble. It's nice to have you guys here. Can you guys please not make me drink that horchata first? Please. I'm going to keep the poll open until that horchata vote goes down. We're not getting started until that I'm fucking rigging the system, okay? I'm rigging the election. I am bringing votes in through the back door at 4 a.m. We'll sit here all night, guys. We'll sit here all night. Come on. You can vote for that Boston cream one. Come on. Or the raspberry. Come on. I am rigging the vote today. I'm not drinking that horchata one first. I'm not doing it. No. I know I said I would abide by the rules, but now I'm taking it back. It's a takesies backsies. I never do this. I'll sit here all day. I will sit here all day. Well, you know what I think? I think that the raspberry cider would be a great beer to start with today. Ha ha, I make the rules, bastards. I think that the raspberry cider I think that the raspberry cider would be a great It's my channel, I'll do what I want. All right, hang on. See what happened is the horchata was winning until they found some votes under the table at 4 a.m. and then the raspberry cider just eked out a win. The mail-in votes changed everything. I don't make the rules, all right? I don't make the rules. I know I said I would abide by the results, but so did well, you know. I determine it to be a rigged election. I will only abide by the results if I think it's a free and fair election. I'm fortifying the election. All right, you might not be thrilled with me, but we'll all leave as friends. Cheers, guys. Yes, Carlin, Lulu Senko, Lula Senko. Ooh, this is a good cider though. If it's any consolation, this is actually really tasty. All right, guys, let's get started for today. We are watching Understanding Queer Theory. We have at least a two-parter, if not a three-parter, if we're feeling extra saucy, but definitely a two-parter. And yeah, I know them, AD. They're okay. I've had their beer before. Guys, please mount that like button for me. As always, mounting the like button lets people know to come join us and to learn more about queer theory ourselves. If you have thoughts about what they're saying, please feel free to chat it in. Just follow the rules of the chat, which is don't be a dick, don't insult me, don't insult other people in the chat. I don't care if you insult the people on the screen, they're not here. But don't insult me, don't insult other people in the chat. Number 2, no whining. If I tell you to stop doing something, just stop doing it. Like we all have to be in the same space, man. No reason to be rude. We're getting started for today. Let's get this party started and learn about queer studies.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. If you saw the PowerPoint I just put up, just looking at a couple of offerings for the spring, I'll mention them again in a moment, but thank you for coming to our first of 4 talks this semester on queer studies. This series is preparing us for the first ever class on queer studies at USI this spring 2022 semester.
I used a different math. I used queer math to count the votes.
It's going to be Gender 100X, and it will be taught by our first speaker, Kristen La Follette. The class will count towards the gender studies minor and count towards the diversity requirement in the core. If you're interested in it, please contact me, Dr. Denise Lin, the Director of Gender Studies. The other class that we were announcing was philosophy class on sexual ethics. That counts towards philosophy major and minor and the gender studies minor as well. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first.
So I once had this crazy idea. And I may do this at some point in the future, although not right now because I have way too much shit to do right now. But I once had this crazy idea that if I could crowdfund for it and people would pay, like I didn't have to pay for it, but I could get other people to pay for it and then I would report back as like a project. I thought that I would go to like a local community college or something or even just do something online. I'm sure there's something online. I thought I would go get a degree in gender studies or like do some like audit gender studies courses at like colleges just because I thought that would be funny. I don't know. I'll get you a bingo card, Jan. Hang on. Let me know if you guys would we're doing crowdfunding for socialist and conference infiltration right now. So we're not doing Carlin's gender studies degree right now, but that would be effing funny if I accidentally got a degree in gender studies just to like find out what they were teaching.
Speaker here and then turn it over to her. I want to encourage people to ask questions. So there's a Q&A component in Zoom.
There's your bingo card, guys.
And so please go ahead and just put your questions in the chat and then we'll come to them at the end of the talk. So our first speaker is Kristen La Follette, who is an assistant professor at USI.
If I got a degree in gender studies, I could hang it on the wall behind me.
In writing, rhetoric, and gender studies. She came to USI in 2019 after receiving her PhD in rhetoric and writing studies and a certificate in women's gender and sexuality studies from Bowling Green University in Bowling Green, Ohio. Her research interests include art-based approaches to research and teaching, the rhetoric of health and medicine,
you do not have a bingo. You're such a liar.
And gender studies. And she is co-editor and co-author of the volume Queer Approaches, Emotion, Expression, and Communication in the Classroom, and has published research in the Journal of Basic Writing and the Journal of Multimodal Rhetorics. In addition to her role as a scholar and teacher, she is a creative writer and is the author of the forthcoming full-length poetry collective Hematology, which was selected as the winner of the 2021 Harbor Editions Laureate Prize. So congratulations to Dr. La Follette. So I am now going to turn the stage over to Dr. La Follette.
Remember, guys, college class.
Get my screen share going here so everyone can see my slides and we will get started. All right, hopefully everybody can see that, but thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Lin, and hi everyone, thank you for attending this talk today. As Dr. Lin said, I'm Dr. Kristen La Follette. I'm an assistant professor here in the English department at USI. I've included my email address here on this first slide. If anyone wants to reach out after the talk, of course, I'm always happy to continue these conversations. So as Dr. Lin mentioned, we're offering our first Queer Studies course in spring 2022, which is really exciting. And this talk and our upcoming talks this semester are to get the USI community interested in and excited about our Queer Studies program. As this talk is the first in the lecture series, my presentation is really meant to be more of an introduction to the concept of queer theory and queer studies as a whole. Essentially, I'm really hoping to lay sort of the groundwork for upcoming queer studies lecture series talks, which will be on October 5th and 9th and October 5th and October 19th and November 9th. So hopefully you can join us for those as well. So in this presentation, I'll start out with some key terms and concepts, and we'll provide some background and context on the term queer, and we'll then introduce queer theory and some of its applications in queer studies and beyond. So before we start, I wanted to provide some quick definitions for some key terms and concepts that will come up throughout the presentation that will just help increase some understanding of some of the things I'm going to talk about. And these are some basic terms that I go over with my gender studies students every time I teach those classes as well. The first term I have listed here is sexuality. And of course, this refers to who you are attracted to. And we have physical attraction.
Yeah, I'm a little
and emotional
disappointed, DW.
attraction.
There is no land
These things
acknowledgement. I
can
agree.
differ or they can align. And the next couple here I think are really important. This is something that I get asked about a lot, the differences between
No, you
sex
don't.
and gender identity.
You do not get asked about that a
These
lot.
terms are often used synonymously, but it's important to remember that they represent two different concepts. Sex refers to what
I just want everyone to keep in mind that what we're watching right now is being lauded as serious academic work by celebrated professors who are published in peer-reviewed journals talking about this. Just keep that in mind as we're watching this. And then question whether or not higher education is actually doing anything of value at all.
you were assigned at birth, male, female, or intersex. And intersex, if you've not heard that term before, refers to a person that is born with anatomy that doesn't fit into the male female binary, and we'll get to this idea of binaries here in a second as well. Gender, on the other hand, we think of as something that is performative or expressive. A person's gender identity could be masculine.
Gender identity
feminine,
is absolutely performative. She's right about that.
Altogether. I think I often hear a lot of the confusion between sex and gender comes from the concept of a gender reveal, which we hear a lot about. And I think this is because, a gender reveal is actually focused on the person's assigned sex rather than their gender identity. That's something that we couldn't know until much later in the person's life. So the next couple here too, I have thinking about the way a person's sex and gender line up, if those things are aligned, meaning they identify with the sex they were assigned at birth. These people are referred to as cisgender, while some people's gender identity doesn't necessarily match the sex they were assigned at birth, and this is what we refer to as transgender. So this next one is something you're going to hear me talk a lot about, and queer theory kind of really works against this idea of binary thinking. But binaries are strict categories that label as something as either this or that. You can kind of think about that in terms of male versus.
Remember that the openly stated goal of queer Marxism is to abolish the gender binary. So what this person is doing is on the college level, laying the foundation to say binaries aren't really valid because they're just black and white categories and people are usually a mix of both. And that's why we don't want to do this or that thinking, because binaries are an oversimplification, because the stated goal of queer Marxism, which is Marxism, is to abolish the gender binary.
Female, man versus woman. Someone who identifies as non-binary, if this is a term you've heard before, doesn't necessarily identify as male or female, but rather beyond the confines of binary thinking that are associated with traditional notions of sex and gender. And then this last one here also ties in with a lot of our discussions here on queer theory, this concept of heteronormativity. And heteronormativity is an attitude that assumes that heterosexuality and identities within the gender binary are normative or stable, while sexualities and identities outside of these understandings are non-normative. So
Wait, AD is giving a great definition right now. AD says queer theory posits, this is because AD is in school, so AD has had to study this stuff. Queer theory posits that heteronormativity denies the existence of alternative realities. Example, NIMB. I don't know what NIMB stands for. So if they say straights won't let them move into the neighborhood and live, we want it, so they say. We want it, so they say. So they say, but in practice, they move in and say the heterosexual experience is not in my backyard. Got it. Thank you, AD.
Heteronormativity, everything is sort of viewed through a lens of
and it is a power
male-female
play. That's right.
partnership and adherence to that
Always a power play.
traditional gender binary we see, male and female. But queer theory is a tool for us to combat heteronormativity and to understand some of these other concepts in more depth. So we'll get into that in our
Queer
next few
theory is a
slides.
tool to help us combat heteronormativity.
So I included this graphic here. This is a resource I often share with my
There it
students just to help them
is. There it
understand the
is. In
difference
its
between
full
some of the terms
form.
that I just described. But this graphic is called the gender unicorn.
This is the same graphic that is used at high schools, middle schools, and even elementary schools all over the country right now to teach your little darlings that they're not really boys and girls, but they are non-binary creatures that are not cisgender at all, but they're queer. And they start doing this in elementary school with the utilization of the gender unicorn. That is documented. I have documented it many times. If you have questions about whether or not this is happening, I can show you the receipts on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. Look at the stuff on the Burlington schools. That'll be the best one. AD, thank you for the super chat. Why do they have to fight heteronormativity? We are all crayons in the box, even straight. I mean, that's exactly right. Why do they want everyone to be queer? Because that is the stated goal of queer Marxism. For people who have not joined us for Socialism Saturday, that is the stated goal. They want everyone to be non-binary. Everyone. Because being non-binary is just a matter of saying, I'm non-binary. So it is actually a goal that every single person can attain.
As you can see, we have some various categories here: gender identity and
this is why, to destroy the marriage, marriage and the family. That's right, Mila.
And I like the way that this lays
Oh
out
no,
how
Penelope,
all of
they
these
never
things are
stopped
different
using it.
elements
Oh
of
no.
our identities.
No.
The gender unicorn is just one visual iteration of this. You've probably seen others or heard of others.
Hang on, got a super chat from Danny. Danny, thank you for the super chat. My sibling has gotten caught up in trans ideology. Watching your vids helped me to understand how, why, and know what to do. So thank you. Thank you, Danny, for telling me that. I really do appreciate it. I hope that they are able to desist from gender ideology at some point, but I'm glad that this was able to give you the perspective to know what was going on. And that is the purpose of these trainings, so I can show you what's going on and explain it to you, so that when it shows up in your real life, you have a better idea of what is actually driving the behaviors. Because when you're in it and you don't understand it, you feel like you're going crazy. And I want you to know that you're not going crazy. So thank you for the super chat and letting me know.
Some are more detailed, some include different categories or different terminology.
Guys, is my mic level okay?
One you've heard of is the genderbread person. And I hear critiques of all of them, but I think ultimately the goal with graphics like this is to educate and push back against heteronormative ideas about sexuality, sex, and gender, and how this tries to convey how these identities are on a spectrum and can't really be limited by the binary thinking that we typically approach.
Mike is good. Thank you.
With. And so I like this one in particular because it's sort of color coded, and you can see each category here has a color that corresponds to the image that you see on the left. And I also like the way it has the arrows sort of representing the way that these identity categories are on a spectrum rather than something that is fixed. So let's get into some of these concepts then. So while this talk is really about understanding queer theory, I do think it's important to provide some
Thinking
background and
queerly.
context
What does it mean to
on
think
the term
queerly?
queer, how it's developed over time, and then queer studies as an interdisciplinary field.
And why is the type so small on the
So
slide?
the term queer itself is sort of difficult to pin down or define. Anna Marie Jagos writes that queer is very much a category in the process of formation. It's not simply that queer has yet to solidify and take on a more consistent profile,
Queer has no
but
meaning.
rather
In
that
other
its
words,
definitional indeterminacy, its elasticity, is one of its constituent characteristics.
oh
So if
my
that's
god.
confusing,
She basically just said that the fact that there is no definition of the term queer is actually one of the definitions of the term queer, is that it can never have a definition. Isn't that convenient?
we'll get into that more in a moment.
Exactly,
She goes
Shuffler.
on to say that queer
Exactly.
is a zone of possibilities,
A
and that
zone of
queer is unaligned with
possibilities.
any specific
Oh.
identity category. So
It's
with all of that, how do we define or even talk about something that is so resistant to definition? More broadly, queer focuses on this idea of mismatching between sex and
Yes,
gender and
Julie.
desire.
Everyone is
To
queer.
be queer is to
You're
exist
queer.
outside of the boundaries
I'm
of
queer.
heterosexuality or a cisgender identity. And I want to just pause and take a moment here to talk about the meaning of the term queer, how it has transformed a bit over time. Originally, we sort of thought about this as a word that referred to something strange or different, and then over time it sort of developed into a derogatory word. It has since been reclaimed, although I want to say too that not all members of the LGBTQIA plus community are comfortable with the term. So it's always good to ask how people identify
That's
or how they
actually,
want to be referred
more
to.
generous than they usually
But queer
are.
can be used as an umbrella term for anybody outside of the cisgender or heterosexual norm, or it can be used to refer to someone who resists binary thinking surrounding identity and sexuality. But to get back to the concept of queer as existing outside heterosexuality and or this
I kind of want to make a t-shirt that says we're all queer now. Like it's like the Alice in Wonderland, we're all mad here. We're all queer here.
gender identity. A heterosexual relationship
good
has
troll
been
t-shirt.
traditionally defined as a relationship between a cisgender man and a cisgender woman. However, we'll get into this too. Queer theory challenges us to question terms and categories like man and woman as well. But like I said, we'll get to that. If it seems like queer theory is just this thing that's impossible to define, we're going to try to break it down as much as possible. But as I mentioned in the previous slide, to be cisgender means that you identify with the sex you were assigned at birth.
I'm gonna do like a queer Alice in Wonderland scape with a big sign that says we're all queer here, all sorts of like rainbows and flowers and sparkles and all this stuff.
And anything outside of that traditional cisgender heterosexual relationship
The leftists won't
is
know what to do
considered
with
to
that.
be unstable and unnatural through that heteronormative lens. But thinking queerly allows us to challenge these assumptions of heteronormativity, which, like I stated earlier, say that a heterosexual relationship is preferred and that gender is fixed, as in these categories of man versus woman. Thinking queerly also helps us to blur the boundaries of sexuality and gender and imagine these concepts as being mobile rather than static. So queer studies then is an exploration of the contributions and lived experiences of LGBTQIA plus people in history, in culture, and in society. And when taking an intersectional approach in queer studies, one will consider social justice issues, identity, sexuality, alongside concepts like gender, race, and class.
So it's a degree in Marxism, just so we're very clear. It's a degree in critical race theory. She mentioned race. It's a degree in critical gender theory. And since she threw class in there, that's Marxism. So gender studies at the University of Southern Indiana is quite literally a course study in Marxism. Congratulations.
An intersectional approach also considers other disciplines as well. We can think about things like politics, sociology, history, maybe even film studies. And before we get to the next slide too, I think I get questions about this a lot as well. If you've not heard the LGBTQIA+ acronym broken down, I think it can be important to kind of understand what these letters are referring to. So the LGBT is probably the part that you've heard most often. L referring to lesbian, G, gay, B, bisexual, T, and transgender. The Q then refers to queer or questioning. Questioning, when we think of that term, is referring to someone who is unsure of their sexual orientation. And then the I is for intersex, which we talked about previously. A is for asexual. And then the plus represents that there are obviously many other orientations and identities that are not listed, but that are part of the plus aspect of this acronym. This can include pansexual. This refers to a person who experiences attraction to all gender identities, and two-spirit, which is typically used to refer to an indigenous person who is non-gender conforming.
Except that
or
gender
sort of
doctor
occupies a third gender. All right, so defining queer theory. And
check this out. Check this out. Just in case you can't read it, I'm going to read off the tenets of queer theory for you. It resists definitions. By definition, queer theory resists definitions. And the tenets of queer theory are resisting categorization, challenging idea of essential identities, questioning binaries, understanding context, examining power relations. Power is Marxism, guys. Destabilizes normative knowledges and identities. All right. Who knows the 4 goals of the woke left? Who's been paying attention to the 86 times I have said this so far this week? 4 goals of the woke left, pop quiz in the chat right now. And we are going to apply the 4 goals of the woke left to the definition of queer theory that is on the screen right now. Gaining power? Yup. Disrupting the system? Yup. Power? People are getting power? Yup. Destabilize the system? Yup. Gaining power? Yup. All right. Exactly, Lady Hawk's got it. The 4 goals of the woke left are always and forever: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. Every single thing that the woke left does is designed to achieve one or more of those goals. So, in this example with queer theory, they've already gained power because they've already taken over the academic institutions, all right? They've gained power. The fact that this person is a college professor, a peer-reviewed, award-winning college professor, that is an indication that they've already gained power. Destabilize the system. She is telling us that queer theory is directly designed to resist definitions, resisting categorization, questioning binaries, also examining power relations, so that can apply to number 1 as well. But every single one of the definitions that they have for queer theory is directly designed to destabilize the system. Because if all of a sudden you've had a system that's worked on the gender binary for centuries and you take the gender binary away, that's going to destabilize the system. Now, we don't have anything mentioning capitalism yet, but yet is going to be the key word to that. Because I'm going to bet all the money in my bank account she mentions capitalism before the end of this presentation. But we do know that's not even true, though, because she mentioned class. She mentioned class in the previous slide. So we know there's some capitalism floating around in this. But number 4, usher in a Marxist utopia. That's what they're going to do when they usher in their queer reality that eliminates the gender binary, that they even say destabilizing. She quite literally uses the word destabilize. Destabilizing normative knowledge and ideas to usher in a utopia in which there are no categories, There are no definitions, there are no categories, there are no binaries. Do you guys see how this applies? It's a little abstract, I understand that. But do you guys see how the 4 goals of the woke left apply directly to this definition of queer theory? Does that make sense for people? Let me know in the chat. Yes, I mean, we know they always mention capitalism. They always mention capitalism in these presentations. This is how you know what the number one enemy of the woke left is. It's not white people. It has nothing to do with race. It's not men. It has nothing to do with gender. They want to get rid of both genders. It's always capitalism. All right, let's keep going.
Being in quotes here because, like the term queer theory is really difficult to define. But theorists and activists really kind of view this resistance to definition as a positive thing because thinking queerly is really about moving past simplistic explanations and universal truths and questioning everything, challenging everything. So despite being difficult to define, there are several key features of queer theory. Meg John Barker outlined some of these, including resisting the categorization of people, challenging the idea of essential identities, questioning binaries like gay or straight or male or female, demonstrating how things are contextual, like thinking about how geography, history, or culture has impacted something, and then examining the power relations underlying certain understandings, categories, and identities.
Power relations is Marxism.
So let's break each of these down.
That's what she means.
Starting with resisting the categorization of people. So people rarely fit into the neat boxes we create for them. Really, identity is a constellation. It's something that's always shifting. And labels are limiting, and queer theory recognizes that labels are limiting and that human identity is something that's very complex. So along the same lines, the second tenet focuses on challenging the idea of essential identities. And challenging this concept really questions arguments that claim people are born a certain way or become a certain way because of their childhood experiences, kind of the nature versus nurture argument. And questioning these arguments creates space for freedom and for a person to really choose to be a particular way. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre noted, we're in a constant process of self-creation, and we are both free and responsible for what we create. The next tenet, questioning binaries like gay, straight, male, and female, show that queer theory challenges this idea of black and white thinking and tries to break down constraints that limit what people can be. So queer theory recognizes that sexuality and identity are on a spectrum and can shift and change. Researcher Alfred Kinsey talked about this, and he once stated, the living world is a continuum in each and every one of its aspects.
I really need to do a deep dive into Kinsey at some point, and I really don't want to because I actually think that the work that he did was actually kind of important, to be honest, in terms of like talking about what people were actually doing in bed, like sexually. I think that was actually important. But I'm scared. I'm scared of what, I mean, like, Kinsey, man, Kinsey was up to his neck in sex all day, every day for years and years and years. That's gonna fuck with you after a while. I mean, honestly. But I do think that the things that he discussed were actually important in terms of like helping people to understand that they weren't like in terms of like helping people to understand like how sex works. So I'll do it at some point, but I'm not necessarily looking forward to it.
This is a queer notion. And psychologist Sandra Bem also noted something similar.
I mean, it's not bad, but it's going to fuck with you after a while because you're just going to get more and more extreme in, you know, your desires.
Through that proliferation, we can undo the privileged status of the 2 and only 2 categories that are currently treated as normal and natural.
No, hang on. No. Just because he did things that he shouldn't have done does not actually invalidate the rest of what he did. Guys, before Kinsey, before Kinsey's research was out there, women would literally think that they were doing something wrong if their husband did not know how to give them an orgasm, because their husband had no idea how that even worked because it wasn't talked about. And women at that time oftentimes didn't even have sex before marriage. So they didn't even know how that stuff worked. There are probably many relationships that Kinsey saved because of his research and explaining to people who had not previously seen that information exactly how it works, how to have an orgasm, how sex works, all this stuff. People didn't know that stuff back then. They really didn't. They had no idea at all. And so to throw the baby out with the bathwater, I think it's a really, yes, women before Kinsey, women literally went to a doctor who would use a vibrator on them to give them an orgasm because they didn't know how to. So don't tell me that wasn't important. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So demonstrating how things are contextual refers to the importance of just basically understanding context. And this context can be geographical, historical, cultural, but queer theory
Well,
helps
ain't
us to
that the truth,
recognize the
Jan?
importance
Some men still have
of
no idea on how to
context and
give women
how
an
it
orgasm.
impacts meaning. So an example would be thinking about same-sex attraction. The ability for someone to act upon their feelings has varied throughout history based on that person's race, their class, and their culture. Theorist Simone de Beauvoir argued some people are just freer than others, and it's important to understand how context impacts people's abilities to live the life that they want. Finally, examining the power relations underlying certain understandings, categories, and identities helps us to think about identity and marginalization. Black feminists have historically pointed out that different groups of women have very different experiences and agendas. For
Why are we
example,
talking
white
about Black
middle-class
feminists and
feminist
queer
agendas
theory?
differ from those of Black or working-class women. Thinkers like Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks have been major voices emphasizing these discussions on queer thinking, identity, and marginalization. In Age, Race, Class, and Sex, Women Redefining Difference, Lorde stated, "It isn't differences that separate feminists, but their refusal to recognize those differences and to examine the distortions which result
Okay,
from
Effin.
misnaming
Who else
them
did it?
and their effects."
There are better ways to get from A to B. Who else did it then? Give me a name. I'm being serious. If there are better ways, who else did it? Would you prefer that women went their entire lives not knowing how to have an orgasm? Would you prefer that men went their entire lives not understanding the very basics of how to turn women on? Would that be a preference for you? Who else did it? Who else got this information and taught it to people? We'll wait for Effin to answer. You want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and then say, well, there are other ways to do it. Did you do it? What other research did it? It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Absolutely no sense.
Queer theory can even help us to destabilize knowledges and identities that have traditionally been considered normative by showing how strange they are or by attempting to delegitimize them.
Well, they didn't,
One
though.
example that came to my
Okay.
mind when I was thinking.
Well, they didn't, though. Otherwise, they already would have known how to do it and Kinsey wouldn't have been necessary. That's exactly right. No one else did it. So just because someone does shady shit does not actually mean that you throw out the rest of the entirety of their contributions. If you are going to be throwing out the contributions of someone every time they do something that's shady, you will have lost the vast majority of major contributions that make our world what it is today. So, in your world, you would rather exist in a society in women. No, the Karma Sutra didn't do it either because that came before and people still didn't know how to do it. If the Karma Sutra was effective in doing this, then Kinsey would not have been necessary. Try again. Well, it didn't make its way into American pop culture, did it? So no, it was not effective. Guys, you can have all the materials in the world, but if people don't know about them, they don't access them, they don't utilize them, then it is not effective. It's not. If the Karma Sutra was the end all be all that everyone would follow, then they already would have been doing that. They were not doing that, which is why someone like Kinsey was necessary. Everyone uses medicine that was tested on animals. That is a good point, Bot. That's exactly right. Do you guys approve of animal abuse? Do you guys all abuse animals in your spare time? Do we want to cancel everyone that's ever tested something on an animal? Just absolute short-sighted thinking at best. Well, then name someone else. You know?
About this was some of the tweets that were posted during the mandatory quarantine period of the pandemic. There were multiple posts about straight relationships and how difficult they had become once the couple had to spend all their time together in the same
Then
space.
name someone else who
One Twitter
actually
user
accomplished
wrote,
what he
"All these
accomplished. You
poor
can't
newlyweds
because
in
there was
quarantine
no
just
one else
aging
that
their
accomplished
marriages
what
in
he was
dog years."
accomplished. And
And
now
examining
you're deflecting because you cannot name someone else who accomplished what Kinsey accomplished. Nope, Freud didn't do it either. Freud didn't do it either at all. It boggles my mind that people are so quick to throw something out that they are absolutely incapable of viewing anything. Like, I really thought, guys, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed by this entire conversation because I really thought that you guys were smarter than this. I thought I had trained my chat and my community and my audience to be significantly more nuanced than what I'm seeing right now. He taught a lot of people to, not me in particular, because he came way before me. He taught a lot of people how to have an orgasm. A lot. A significant amount. Millions and millions of women. And he also taught men how it all works to create better marriages. And you guys want to throw all that out? I truly am really nope, we don't all figure it out. Because in a time before Kinsey, a lot of women never had orgasms, and men didn't even know how to have sex with their wives. They didn't even know how to get their wives turned on. They didn't even know that their wives were supposed to get wet before they had sex. They had no fucking idea how it all worked. So your own ignorance on this topic, Effin, it says more to me than anything that and than any problem you might have. I'm really disappointed. I'm really finding myself very disappointed right now because I really thought I had trained everyone to be much more nuanced than this, but I guess not. Shauna, I just walked in. Why are we arguing about Kinsey? All I know is the Kinsey scale, which is useful. We're arguing about Kinsey because the chat wants to throw out everything that Kinsey ever did because they don't like that maybe he got a little too extremist in his methodology at some point, which I actually kind of, I'm not defending it. I'm not saying it was good, but if you're studying sex all day every day, of course that's going to impact you at some point and you're going to be driven crazy by it. Kinsey drove himself crazy. It doesn't mean that he didn't make really valid contribution. He also helped a lot of LGBT people. Yes, he did. So if you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, except that you can't disprove anything I'm saying, so you're literally making shit up. Literally making shit up. You are incapable of disproving any point that I've made. You have not disproven any point that I've made so far. And now, because you haven't disproven it, we're now deflecting and you're resorting to making shit up. I really, really, really thought that my audience was better than that. I really thought it was better than that. Well, songs that are catchy, I don't even know if I believe this now because I haven't looked into it. I haven't seen it in person. And because my chat is lying to me right now and I'm able to disprove them, not even trying that hard, I don't know that I believe this now. That's the danger that you set, guys, when you start lying and making shit up and taking the most extreme possible view that is completely unnuanced, is people start to not believe you. Right now, a lot of the people in my chat have no credibility so far as I'm concerned, so I don't believe what you're saying about him. Don't believe it. I'll have to see for myself.
This claim and many others like it that were posted during quarantine through a queer lens lead us to question why heterosexual relationships are so desirable if the couples can't stand spending extended periods of time around each other. So let's talk a little bit then about queer theory beyond queer studies. So while queer theory does have its beginnings in gay and lesbian studies,
I'm just going to say, this is the last thing I'm going to say about it. There were members of my chat and of my audience who I really thought more highly of than I think of them now. And I mean, maybe that doesn't mean anything. It probably doesn't. But I expect people in my audience to take a much more nuanced approach and to not overtly make shit up and then to twist things out of context to make them mean something they don't in order to win a fucking debate because you guys are addicted to fucking outrage. There are a few people in the chat right now that I thought more highly of that my opinion of them has now dropped dramatically, if that means anything.
Its applications and use are really far-reaching. We're going to talk about some examples of that. Queer theory is really all about questioning binaries and identities, including what is typically been considered a fixed identity, but it's also a theoretical approach that goes beyond queer studies to question the categories and assumptions on which current popular and academic understandings are based.
Indeed.
So a queer theory lens then challenges us to think queerly in all situations, examining norms and traditions beyond what we think we understand. It also helps us to question what we've been taught and to reimagine concepts and ideas without binaries or constraints that unnecessarily limit our thinking and the possibilities that are available. One example of this is can be seen in a recent research project of mine that I did about reimagining classroom spaces to create more conducive learning environments for students with post-traumatic stress disorder. So while research is typically understood as having specific genre conventions, I decided.
Super chat from Jen. Jen, thank you for the super chat. Like Alfred Nobel, I was ashamed of having invented. Alfred Nobel, I read was ashamed of having invented dynamite. However, do we destroy the Nobel Prize, let alone the accomplishments it has found through the centuries, because of his disgust? I say no, and that's exactly the point. Jen, thank you for illustrating this so beautifully. There are discoveries that are made that are important. There are things that are taught that are important, that actually do impact real people in real lives. And if we're going to throw everything out because someone doesn't pass a purity test, because someone has made mistakes, because someone has done things that we don't approve of, because someone has done things that maybe when we find downright horrific, and you're throwing out all of the knowledge and the contributions of that person, that is short-sighted and illogical at best. So thank you, Jen, for stepping in and being the voice of reason. I appreciate it. All right, guys, we're refocusing now on the presentation. Let's keep going.
Decided to approach the project a little more queerly. I intersected some visual elements like original photography and artwork, edited classroom diagrams with poetry and narrative. And through this, I was able to provide an overview of my classroom experiences as a teacher of several students with PTSD and outline ways to hack those classroom spaces. And that approach just requires that instructors consider students with disabilities from the start of the class and not as an afterthought. And this concept really seemed like a queer notion to me. This idea that from the beginning, you would create a classroom space with disabled students in mind. And that only further encouraged me to take a queer approach in putting together the research project and working outside of traditional academic research to better convey my project to a broader audience. So another interest that I have is using art as a tool in the teaching of writing, and this really requires a queering through the constellating of the disciplines of visual art and writing. While art really hasn't traditionally been seen as playing a major role in writing classrooms,
It is extraordinarily
research
lazy,
shows
Randy.
that, and this is quoting Patricia Levy, art may have unmatched potential to promote deep engagement, make lasting impressions, and possesses unlimited potential to educate. So harnessing this artistic power in writing classrooms then suggests that students could grasp difficult concepts and apply them to a variety of situations more readily, thus leading us to really think about the ways we have traditionally established disciplinary bounds. So examining disciplinarity through a queer lens helps us to see the ways that various fields interact with each other and sort of challenges the way that the arts and the humanities have been devalued in the past in favor of STEM programs. And another example that comes to mind is an article by scholar Sandra Faulkner, whose work always inspires me, but this one project in particular stood out. Her article, which is featured in a journal in GLBTQ World Making, is called Motherwork Collage, a Queer Scrapbook. And I will show you some samples.
Thank you, Wyoming girl. I appreciate it.
But it's a series of collage poems composed from family artifacts, feminist research, and systematic recollections. And that's pulled directly from her article. So in her exegesis, Faulkner writes, I use words and images to queer understandings of white middle-class mothering. The motherwork collages serve as a kind of queer Pinterest scrapbook that critique and interrogate expectations and attitudes about what mothers should do, think, and feel. Good mothers in a pro-natalist culture.
So essentially, they're saying that queering motherhood is just, it's about like questioning the stereotype of what a mother is. These people do more to reinforce stereotypes than like anything I've ever seen. Wyoming gal, what like, so what you need to know is that queer theory does not have a definition, and it is basically about rebelling against stereotypes while simultaneously reinforcing stereotypes. If you look at it through that lens, it'll explain it. It should explain it, I think. Yes, so queer means to destroy all definitions. It also means to subvert the way that most people do things, to do them in a different way. What they're doing with queer theory, guys, is they're teaching people to subvert the normal system. Normal in this case being what the majority of people do, okay? Like a bell curve, what the majority of people do. So why might it be advantageous for a college to teach its students to subvert the normal system? Do you think? That's a pop quiz for the chat. Why might it be advantageous for higher? Yes, exactly. Because that will disrupt the system. It will also teach them to question all things about society, which is what critical theory is. Critical theory is inherently about being critical, which leads to them questioning capitalism, which leads to them saying, maybe we don't need to engage in capitalism anymore. Capitalism is the normal way to do it. We want to queer everything. So if capitalism is the norm, we want the opposite of capitalism, which is Marxism.
Culture should channel their creativity into things like making scrapbooks of their progeny. Spending time developing identities other than mothers, such as
she just called the child a
academic
progeny.
and partner, makes fulfilling the normative role of the good mother impossible, because a good mother devotes all of herself to her children. So we see several kind of allusions to queering and queer theory throughout this, kind of challenging the status quo. But while Faulkner identifies,
if they don't ingrain in the idea of college students that their job is quite literally to question everything about society, then they will never be able to overthrow capitalism. That's the real goal of all of this. And I really want people to understand this. They must ingrain in their heads that their goal is to question everything about normal society. Because if they do not do that, they will never be able to overthrow capitalism.
as a queer scholar, this project embraces queer theory sort of beyond queer studies and is an exploration of a version of motherhood that's uninhibited by societal norms and attitudes and expectations. And this queer theory approach allows Faulkner to sort of re-examine motherhood through the genre of the scrapbook. That's something that's typically viewed as existing outside of academic and scholarly work. But while the piece is scholarship and is published in a scholarly journal, it's also deeply personal and weaves the author's own experiences as a mother in with experiences that her own mother had. This mixing of genre and blending of the academic and personal and resistance to traditional
this person needs a coffee or something. Can someone please give her a coffee or like some cocaine or something?
Great example of how
can someone please give this woman a line of coke just to like amp up the energy?
Encourage us to work beyond prescribed norms.
The hell is this?
So here are a couple collages from Faulkner's Motherwork collage piece. And both collages are featured alongside poetry in the article, which creates a really interesting juxtaposition. But they work toward establishing a queer version of motherhood that goes against traditional norms and that works for the author. So in this first collage, we see an excerpt from writer and scholar Sarah Ahmed that reads, "The demand for happiness is increasingly articulated."
She is a Marxist Benstein, you're right. Okay, guys, one of the things we've talked about, and we normally talk about this in relation to the socialists, but it seems a good time to bring it up. These people try to bore you to death. They try to get you to give up and to stop listening because they bore you to death. And then as soon as your brain shuts off, they say the most crazy shit you've ever heard in your life. But they really want you to get your brain to shut off first before they say the crazy shit. But I promise you, this is held true through 2 years of happy hours. As soon as you're like almost nodding off and going to sleep, they bust out with the most insane lines that you've ever heard in your life. So everyone, this is why we have drinks. Get a snack, get a cookie, whatever you need, but we need to make sure we're listening still.
Social ideals. The belief that happiness should be an effect of following social ideals, almost as if happiness is the reward for certain loyalty. So Faulkner's article actively resists this concept through a queer approach to academic work, to genre, and ultimately to motherhood. So really, when we're thinking about queer theory, whether we're thinking about it within queer studies or applying
You're already
beyond
doing
queer
more than most
studies,
if you're here, Wyoming gal.
it pushes
Hang in there.
back against dominant paradigms that insist that something has to be either this or that. Thinking queerly in any situation helps us to see beyond these limitations and imagine a world really unconstrained by binary thinking. And this can be difficult to do. I think binary thinking is something that we have always been taught to try to categorize things, place them neatly in categories that feels comfortable to do that. But queer theory sort of challenges that and encourages
Perfect
us
timing,
to
Grandma
open
Nay.
up
I
our
wouldn't start
minds
over.
to
You're good.
categorization that exists outside of that, or even just resisting this concept of putting labels.
Thank you,
on
Zarlo.
things. So let's talk a little bit about queer studies then, since
Excellent.
we are celebrating our first queer studies course here at USI starting in the spring. So what is queer studies, and really what is queer theory's place in queer studies? So just kind of a brief recap of what I've already said. Queer
$2.
studies is
Pay up.
intersectional, and what I mean by that is we think about queer studies along with and as constellated with concepts like race and class or gender and sexuality, religion, among other things. And it's also interdisciplinary as it pulls from other fields like politics and history. Queer studies explores the experiences of LGBTQIA plus people and really moves beyond just lesbian and gay studies to incorporate other sexualities and to take a more critical approach to sexuality as a whole, including thinking more openly about this concept of heterosexuality. So some topics within queer studies include sex versus gender identity, sexuality, the HIV and AIDS epidemic, heteronormativity, privilege, pop culture,
Thank you,
contemporary
bot.
politics and lawmaking.
Honor
These are all
system.
things that we'll discuss in that queer studies class in the spring, and of course among more topics as well. But thinking about queer theory then and sort of its role in queer studies, queer theory is really a helpful lens in
That's
queer
right,
studies
Randy.
because it reveals
Exactly.
some of these assumptions that have been held throughout history and that some of us still hold, including that sexual identity is fixed from birth, or that sexuality is binary, as in this idea of straight or gay, and based on a gender binary of attraction to men or women, and that people can be divided into normal and abnormal on the basis of their sexual attractions and practices. Queer theory tells us that these assumptions are flawed. So queer theory allows us to see sexuality, gender identity and expression, and relationships as unconstrained by these assumptions and other normative ideals that have privileged certain ways of being while marginalizing others. To return to Jagos, who I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, she writes that if queer lives up to its radical potential and does not solidify as merely another acceptable category, its ongoing evolutions cannot be anticipated. Its future is, after all, the future. And this kind of just refers to the ability of queer theory to sort of open up the possibilities of what can be. So these are the sources that I used in this talk, and I have access to all of them. If anybody is interested in reading more, I can pass those along. And I really appreciate you all listening today and for your interest in learning more.
There's still like half an hour of this. There must be lots of questions, which is good for us.
Take any comments.
Questions are the craziest part.
Has. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Krista,
Hang on. Grandma Nay, thank you. I just got a little money today and want you to know how very much I appreciate you. Grandma Nay, I really do appreciate that. I appreciate you too. You are a much loved member of the community and we're so glad you're here. So thank you for that. All right. So guys, I guess we're moving into Q&A, and look at this. We have like a good 25 minutes of Q&A here. And so Q&A in these presentations is always the most eventful part because during the presentation, they're prepared for that. They basically have a script that they're reading off. It's all very formulaic. But when you get into the Q&A, they are not prepared. And so they tend to say the quiet part out a lot more. So let's see what happens now. Please mount that like button for me. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. I think Denise is still here as well. So now's the opportunity for y'all to ask questions. I see we have one here. Glenn Crystal asked, you mentioned masculine and feminine and the key concepts. What do they mean?
Yes. So when we think of, well, this is another thing that I love talking about with my gender studies students as well. But we kind of have not only is this idea of masculine and feminine a binary, but we also have some limiting constraints within what we have thought of as being masculine or feminine throughout history. And so I think queer theory sort of challenges us to break down those categories as well. This idea that masculinity is a certain thing and femininity is a specific thing. But when we traditionally think about these two concepts, we think of masculine as being strong and well respected. We can think about traditional gender roles where men were working outside of the home and taking care of their families. These things are considered to be masculine concepts, while femininity is more withdrawn, submissive, right? And we can even think about the ways that traditional dress has been placed on men and women, that women wear these kinds of things and men wear these kinds of things. But we can sort of think about one of the things that has come up a lot in recent times is this idea of toxic masculinity. And so this is kind of a way to take queer theory and sort of break down this idea of what we think of when we think of masculinity versus femininity. And thinking about toxic masculinity tells us that this traditional concept of masculinity that we've held throughout time that says men have to be this certain way is not only harmful toward women, but it's harmful toward men as well, because it really perpetuates these ideas of like violence and aggression as being the way to be truly masculine, right?
But that's only
And
because they're perpetuating a stereotype that does not exist. Like I said, these people are better at perpetuating stereotypes than like any other people on the planet.
thinking about this concept.
Although I will say this, and this is going to get me into trouble. There are instances where I have seen examples that I would qualify as toxic masculinity. I really will. I think that when men double down into like this MGTOW woman hating thing, I think that people who like I think it can be really well, it feeds into the stereotypes that these people have. And so I think there is some there, but I also think that that whole movement is a response to people like this. Yes, exactly, Shauna, the incels. The incels double down on this shit all the time. Not good, but is it a response to people like this? Well, sure.
Really sort of breaks down this idea that there's any specific way to be a man or be a woman, and really kind of opens up the possibilities of how we can express ourselves freely within these categories and kind of break them down. So I don't know if that necessarily answered the question, but like we have traditional ideals of masculinity versus femininity, and some people are comfortable within those, but then other people have worked toward breaking them down and have sort of created this third, more androgynous gender altogether.
It's not a third gender. It's not a third gender at
Thank
all. That's
you
not
so
correct.
much.
Oh God.
One of the other questions that was asked, you already answered. Does LGBTQA plus IA include heterosexuals? But you already broke that down. So I'm going to ask the next question from our philosophy colleague, Mary Lynn. You talked about how queer theory rejects false binaries. One of the basic tenets of American pragmatist philosophy is the rejection of false dichotomies. I know queer theory is generally more grounded in European theoretical approaches like Foucault, but do you know if there's work being done connecting queer theory to American pragmatist traditions?
So actually I want to address the first question because the question was, does the LGBTQIA plus acronym include heterosexuals? And I think I heard recently that if you kind of expand it out, it's like LGBTQI, A plus, but one of the A's has been built in to represent allies of the LGBTQ plus community. So something I thought I would throw out there that is relevant. To answer the second question, I am not sure that I have a great answer for this, other than all of the queer theory material that I typically teach in my classes and that I use is always by French people. So,
Oh, so like
you know, like
Foucault?
I mentioned several
Is
of
that
them,
what you're
right? Like
saying?
de
Foucault?
Beauvoir and Sartre and Foucault, of course.
Foucault!
Right. So I don't know
Exactly.
how well, you know, this has been expanded, but I do know a lot of these ideals that we kind of base this modern concept of queer theory on is from these
Winner,
French
winner, chicken
philosophers and
dinner.
scholars from back in the day. So yeah, I think that is about all I know about that.
Good. Thank you so much. There's another question here from an anonymous attendee, and the question is there a term for when physical attraction and emotional attraction are misaligned?
Oh, that is a good question. One thing that one letter that I don't often see represented in the LGBTQIA plus acronym is demisexual. And so this term is typically used to refer to someone who doesn't experience a romantic or sexual attraction to someone unless they have a strong like emotional connection to that person. And so I'm wondering if that maybe is sort of getting at what the person is asking. But the other thing that I would say about that is this idea of queer and this concept of queer theory is all about breaking down this idea that we even need a label to refer to what it is that we experience in terms of our identity, because queer theory is all about sort of breaking down these categories and these labels and saying like, you know, it's, I guess a good way to put it is like, traditionally we have thought of like heterosexuality and cisgender, like those are the stable normative categories. And instead we've kind of come up with other categories that we've identified as queer, like lesbian and gay. But some queer activists would say, even within that, you're still working within that binary thinking and that categorization. Whereas queer theory really gives us the opportunity to kind of like throw all that away. And rather than sort of like joining the table of like creating categories and labels, we're kind of smashing it and saying, you can be whatever you want to be and exist anywhere on these spectrums and you don't have to have a name for it. I don't know if maybe that's like a way around answering that question, but if we're sticking with our queer theory theme.
Can I ask a question actually?
Yes, please do.
Only because it was something I've thought about recently, and you mentioned it at the beginning of your talk. The gender reveal trend recently has been it's weird, right? And as a parent, when my kid was born 20 some odd years ago, that wasn't a thing, these gender reveal parties, right? Do you know if anyone, any queer theorists, any scholars are like talking about it? Is it kind of a reaction
Who cares?
you know,
Why does it matter?
the more public discussions about queerness? Is it a reaction to legalized gay marriage? Like, I don't know. I'm just wondering if people are
Why would it be a
about
reaction
this.
to legalize gay marriage?
So the way that I see these conversations taking place most often is publicly via social media. I mean, like Twitter is always talking about.
Why can't a gender reveal party? And by the way, I think gender reveal parties are stupid. So I'm not defending gender reveal parties because I think they're stupid. There was a gender reveal party in New Hampshire where they set a fucking forest on fire in their gender reveal party. Okay. I think they're stupid. But I understand why people are having them because it's a chance to celebrate with friends. It's a chance to be excited about having a kid. It's a chance to get people. This is the most important thing. It's a chance to get people to give you presents. Like, I mean, come on, if you're having a kid and you're not going to turn down presents and things from other people. And so I can understand why people have them, as like just like, something to do, something to celebrate, some reason to have a party, stuff like that. But it's not like to say that a gender reveal party is a backlash to gay marriage. That's retarded. Right? They like set fireworks off or something. I was like, what the hell? And it's over the top because they want to film it and put it on social media and go viral on social media. Like, this is not a college level thing that requires that like in-depth analysis. People want to film something fun, put it on social media. They want to drink with their friends, not the pregnant person, of course, but like everyone else around the pregnant person. They want to eat food, they want to get presents. Like, this is not a backlash to gay marriage. That's retarded. I'm sorry. It is fundamentally.
What's going on with this gender reveal stuff. And of course, there was that incident recently where the people set something on fire trying to have a gender reveal and
See?
caused a lot of damage. And
Even they
so
knew about it.
there have been a lot of conversations that I've seen publicly about this. I haven't read a lot of scholarship about it recently, but I don't know why there has seemingly been sort of like an increase in this concept of the gender reveal recently.
Presence
But
and social
it's
media. That's why.
confusing
It's
to
not
everybody, and I
confusing.
think it only sort of
It's not
further
confusing at
feeds
all.
the ignorance that people have kind of surrounding these concepts. Because the thing that I always hear people say is like, well, how can there be, this many genders? Like, aren't people just male or female? And it's kind of this like total misunderstanding. And I think a lot of it comes from the way people use gender, because even on like government forms, you see like select your gender and it says male or female, but that's a misunderstanding of what that term actually means. So
If
I
anything,
think people are
social
talking
media
about it more
caused gender
nowadays
reveal
because
parties.
these discussions about gender identity and sexuality are more open. People are talking about them more. And I think people are recognizing that this idea of the gender reveal is sort of working against what we want people to know about this terminology and how it helps them to understand how gender identity is something completely separate from sex. So I don't know if I really have like a great answer, but that's sort of been my experience. And I feel like every time I work with my gender studies students, I'm always kind of like working against the damage that has been done because of the way that we've sort of appropriated the term gender.
Great. I saw a couple of questions come in regarding what might be taught in the queer studies course that you're teaching in the spring. And so I've been privileged enough to see the syllabus, but or the one that you'd worked on. I don't know, it probably has changed some, but can you tell us a little bit about what you have planned for the course? And I want to know, what are you most excited about?
She's teaching college students a
Yes,
course in this.
absolutely. I am also incredibly,
Probably right now.
incredibly excited about this queer studies course in the spring.
As we
And
speak.
so we are going to talk about so many things that, of course, the class will take an intersectional approach. So we'll be sort of looking at queer
Intersectionality.
studies alongside some of these things I already mentioned, like gender, sexuality, and race and class, religion, all of these different things, how they intersect. And then we'll kind of start out the class with sort of a basic overview of kind of a lot of the
I don't know if
concepts
you're
that I've
supposed to,
discussed
but I bet
today, like
people
this
do,
idea of
right?
queer,
Am I wrong
what it
about that?
means, and some of the historical transformation of the term and what it means for us today. We'll have a unit on queer theory, and we'll sort of break down, because one of the other things I mentioned too is that queer studies sort of moves beyond lesbian and gay studies to incorporate all different sexualities. And so we'll be talking about everything within that LGBTQIA plus spectrum, breaking down what each of those identities mean, and kind of even questioning those ideas of categories and labels. We'll be talking a lot about history. We'll be doing a lot of exploration of LGBTQ plus films and how that has impacted culture and society, power relations, HIV and AIDS epidemic, some historical events like the Stonewall riots. It's kind of a broad overview of concepts that you would then discuss or focus on in later queer studies courses. Since this is a 100 level class, it's kind of a survey of all these interesting things. But I think honestly, one of the things that I'm most excited about is the book that we'll be using for that class, which has been such an excellent resource for me. And it's called Queer Graphic History. And it's actually a graphic novel by Meg John Barker and Julia Scheel that outlines everything, I feel like, that, you know, these basic concepts that you would need to know about queerness and queer theory. And I love it because it's super approachable. It takes some of these like really difficult concepts from these French scholars and philosophers who are doing all of this work, and kind of breaks them down and gives you a visual representation too. Because I mentioned I'm always interested in like the intersections of visual rhetoric and intersecting image and text, and how those things sort of impact our understanding and ability to make meaning. So I think the fact that I get to use that book in this class, and that it's way cheaper than a traditional textbook, I'm really excited about that for sure.
That's awesome. So one of the questions is allyship. Do you have any suggestions? I think a student asked, you know, how can straight people be stronger allies to the LGBTQIA community?
Yes, so this is a great question. One thing that I didn't even get to in this talk that I think is really important is understanding pronouns and how to use them. And I totally like dropped the ball on this because I see you both have your pronouns listed in your bubbles. I should have done that. But it's a great thing to be able to, even if you are you know, heterosexual, cisgender, but you're an ally, I think it's always a great idea to share your pronouns, because this sort of normalizes the sharing of pronouns for everybody and people who might not be as comfortable with it. But people have pronouns that they prefer to use based on their specific gender identity. And it goes a long way to show allyship and respect when you use the pronouns that that person has requested. I've heard, you know, sort of mixed reviews about whether or not it's okay to just ask someone what their pronouns are, but I think it can go a long way just to show kind of a sense of respect, and that you are invested in being an ally and calling them by the thing that they want to be referred by. The other thing I would mention too with pronouns is that sometimes, because we are so infiltrated with this idea of binaries and seeing people as either male or female, and it's kind of difficult to think outside of those categories that have been sort of pushed on us our whole lives. So sometimes misgendering happens and you might use the wrong pronouns for someone. But in that situation, I think it's always best just to try to be as gracious as possible, just kind of gently correct yourself and move on, and then try to do better and remember next time. Pronouns can be great. And I do this in all of my classes as well. I tell students they don't have to share this with me in front of the class, but I tell them,
You don't have to
pronouns that you
apologize,
would
just
like me to
move
use,
on
or
and
if your
do
name is
better.
different than what appears
I feel like I need to make a
on the
recording of
roster,
that.
please let me know, because I always want to make
Just
sure
move on and do better
that
next
I'm
time.
respecting that. Other things that you can do is to, if you see a problem happening, if you see someone being harassed or bullied, if it's safe for you to step in, you know, and just say that's not okay. Correcting people who misgender other people, I've seen this happen before as well. And the other thing is too, is just supporting queer activism, going out and supporting queer-owned businesses. These are all, I think, tangible things that we can do to be good allies. One of the other things that you can do as well is, I don't actually know if we have this at USI, but one of the things I did at my previous institution was host safe zone trainings to kind of share like a lot of what we talked about today with other people on campus who want to be good allies, but had some of these same questions that people have asked today.
Thank you. Yes, we do have safe zone trainings.
Awesome.
Yes, we do have that. Well, talking about the need for safe zone training, there's a question here. Why do you think there's still so much discrimination with regards to queer issues?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer for this, but I think the thing that I encounter most often that I hear people saying is just that, like, a complete lack of understanding of this idea of gender identity. And I think we kind of touched on this sort of already, but I think there are a lot of things that have sort of fed into this. But I have heard people saying like, oh, I'm not going to share my pronouns. You can see what my pronouns are by looking at me, or other statements like that, that sort of don't understand this idea of difference between gender identity and sex assigned at birth. And it's just like a complete discomfort with this idea of thinking outside of the binaries. I kind of think it always goes back to that idea as well, is that we have always been taught to categorize things, and that categories are safe and simple, and things are either this or that. And so like recently too, so like I'm a professor in the English department. I hear people say this all the time, like they, them,
Professor
that can't be
in
someone's pronouns
the
because
English
those words refer to
department.
something plural, and it doesn't make any sense. And I've heard people refuse to use it based on that.
And those people are
but
right.
it's just like really it comes down to understanding and respecting other people's preferences. And I think just given like the state of our world the past couple of years with the pandemic and the political climate, I think we're just sort of lacking this concept of basic respect and understanding of other people and their experiences. And what I really appreciate about the humanities as a whole, but gender studies and queer studies is really geared toward helping us to be able to become more open-minded, respectful individuals who are compassionate about other people and about being
No one
advocates.
is compassionate except them. No one else has
So
empathy
we
but
have
them.
one last question, and then I'm going to ask you if you want to say anything about your friend Mel, who's going to be our next speaker.
And guys, this is about to wrap up, but just as a reminder, we have a part 2. Stick around. We're not done yet. I may be almost done my drink. I may pour that horchata yet, just for all of you who voted for it. Don't think I'm reneging, but I did want to drink this first, and I appreciate you. Well, you didn't have much choice in it, did you? But we do have a part 2 coming up, so, stick around. We're not going anywhere yet. We're not done.
But we can just ask this one more question and then wrap up. So someone wrote, I've noticed a rise in the topic of platonic marriage. Would you say that the past 1.5 years of isolation has shifted the populace to focus on queer platonic partnerships over romantic partnerships? And then like a last minute question, if we identify as different genders, can we also identify as different races,
Drink
different
the fucking
organisms?
horchata.
I don't understand that one.
Okay. All right. So actually, I just read an article on this idea of platonic marriage, and I think this is so interesting.
Platonic marriage?
And I love this idea because it's totally queer, and it's totally like exists
like you don't have
outside of
sex?
this idea
Wait,
of what marriage should be.
Wait.
And this is something I did.
Wait. I'm sorry. I was distracted by beer, and I did platonic marriage? You want to marry someone that you're never going to have sex with? Does that seem like a horrible idea to anyone else? For all the married people, does that seem like a really fucking bad idea? I mean, I can understand it for asexual people. Okay, fine. Why would you get married? Why can't you just be friends? I mean, I like maybe tax benefits, I guess, but why do you have to get married? Like, why can't you just live together and be like roommates? Why do you have to get married? Oh my God.
Didn't mention earlier as well, but some queer activists have even sort of critiqued this idea of gay marriage because it feels like LGBTQ plus people are sort of joining a part of the establishment.
Oh my God.
Instead of breaking it down and creating their own thing that, kind of.
So gay marriage, what she's saying is that gay marriage was they actually have a word for this. They call it homonormativity, which is when queer people try to act like heterosexuals. They don't like that. It's not allowed. And so if 2 gay men are just getting married and starting a family, that's homonormativity. They don't consider it queer. They consider it to be adapting to heteronormativity. And so it's bad. Or 2 lesbians, when they move in with each other on like the second or third date, and they just want to start a family and be happy lesbians until someday they have one of those lesbian fights and they break up and then they go move in with other people. When those lesbians just move in together, that's called homonormativity. You're not allowed to do that and be queer. And so that's what they're saying is that when like gay marriage was not queer enough, essentially. AD, thank you for the super chat. Are we free to choose or not? Well, apparently not, AD. Except if you choose something that doesn't look like traditional marriage. That's the only thing you're allowed to choose.
Moves away from this idea of the binary and this expectation of marriage. because there's heteronormative.
I told you so, bot.
LGBTQ plus people be more like heterosexual people, right?
See?
And so I love this idea of platonic marriage. I think it really works against that idea. I'm not sure about why the increase of it has been happening, but I think it probably has something to do with the idea that we're becoming more comfortable with moving away from these heteronormative ideals.
How many people are in a
Less
platonic
people are getting
marriage?
married, less people are having children. So I think we can already see some of this reflected in society. But I think it's a way for
They
people
did
to
hate
just
him.
say,
That's
I don't want
correct.
to be alone and I want to have a partner. We're not necessarily romantically connected, but I'm going to live my life with this person and they're going to be my life partner, but it's platonic and it's just totally a queer concept that works against everything that we know about.
And guess what it also does? It abolishes the biological family because they're not procreating and having kids. Or if they do have kids, they're not going to be as a result of like biology. So it abolishes the biological family. It means everything. Once you understand, listen, if you have never seen one of my Abolish the Family streams, you need just search it on the channel, on my YouTube channel. Look up Abolish the Family. You will find at least 5 or 6 of them. And I promise you, once you understand Abolish the Family, you are going to see Abolish the Family stuff show up in like every single presentation these people do. So right now, when she is talking about platonic marriage, where they're basically buddies that are getting married, but they aren't having sex, they aren't procreating, they aren't having biological kids, that is supporting Abolish the Biological Family, which is one of the core tenets of Marxism that was written about in the Communist Manifesto. It is literally in the effing Communist Manifesto. It is crazy when you start seeing Abolish the Family show up everywhere. It's a real thing. This is not something that's like in some back corner room somewhere. This is effing real. AD says they are committing gay, bi, lesbian cultural genocide. Yes, they are. Because their ultimate goal is to abolish the family. Sexless marriages are like the passion dies after a few decades and you're just in it because of society, but changing attitudes about divorce change that. They want to make it acceptable. I think every marriage goes through like dry spells with sex probably, but like to marry someone that you're not even like attracted to or like in a romantic I don't understand it. I really don't understand it at all. It's like sex does serve a purpose, right? That's why makeup sex is a thing. It bonds people together. Crazy.
Marriage in society.
See, look, the crazy stuff always comes at the very end of the presentation. This is why we watch the whole thing.
In America, especially, I think. So I think maybe the increase in that is happening because we are more open to these ideas and sort of working our way to push back against this binary thinking and these heteronormative ideals. The other question that you mentioned, Denise, was about, can you say it again?
I don't think it was really relevant.
Okay.
But what I'd like to ask you is, so we can wrap up here, but your colleague, Mel, well, at least somebody you recommended to me, is going to be our next speaker. So I don't know if you want to hype Mel for our next talk on October 5th.
Yes, so as Dr. Lynn mentioned in my little intro, I co-edited a book called Queer Approaches, Emotion, Expression, and Communication in the Classroom. That was a project that I worked on in
this woman co-edited a book about the classroom. Just like let that sink in.
And one of them was Dr. Mel Michelle Lewis, and they contributed a chapter to that book and are just an incredible queer studies scholar. And so I recommended them and we invited them to be our next speaker in this series.
I can understand platonic marriage for asexual people. That kind of makes sense, but
and for you all to be able to hear more about their research, I think it's going to be very exciting.
Well, guys, that does wrap us up for the first part, but stick around. We're watching that second part. We are. Next on the docket, we have, and I'm really excited about this one, we have queer studies, liberatory education, and creative practice. Liberatory in this context means to liberate us from capitalism. However, before we get into that, I do need to pour another beer. And because I don't renege, I'm going to drink the horchata IPA that I said I wasn't going to drink earlier, even though you guys voted for it. And please, can we just pray that this does not taste like a bitter, awful IPA? I bought it on accident, all right? I was mesmerized by the fact that it said vanilla, coconut, lactose and cinnamon and horchata, and I ignored the IPA part when I was at the beer store. They did blow off the transracial question, Randy, but maybe we'll get into it this time. We'll see. All right. Yes, bingo cards can carry over. If this beer sucks, it's all your fault, all right? I hope it's good. I want it to be good. Let's see how horchata-like this beer is. Oh. I don't want it to bowl over. Lots of head. That's the good part. It tastes so bitter. I don't want to. Oh, it's so hoppy. Why am I doing this? It doesn't smell like horchata at all. Oh no, I might have to dump it out. We're gonna let the foam settle. We'll see. I do think so. Every once in a while, like so, Dogfish Head IPA, the Dogfish Head 90-minute IPA is the only IPA that I like. I thought this was a pale ale when I bought it. I didn't see the India in front of it. All right, we're gonna give it a try, but if I have to dump it out, I will. But I'm letting the head settle first. Yeah, it smells like hops. It really does. I don't understand IPAs at all, but I'm going to give it a try. Beth, thank you for the super chat. Evening, comrades. What's the deal with Wits X in all the work? So I think that's like their version of like queering words or whatever. That's all I know is it's like a signifier for them. It's like an in-group thing where they use X on their words. That's the best answer I have, Beth. I wish I had a better one. But thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Welcome. I'm going to do a full sip. I'm letting the head settle. Okay, George, relax. Alexa says, Carlin, you've inspired me to try fancy beers after I'm done having kids and breastfeeding, which is probably going to be a long time. Well, get ready. Find a good craft beer store. Go and talk to them. Everyone can find a beer that they like. I'm gonna drink it. I'm just waiting. I'm working up to it. AD says, Carlin, did you see the Jubilee video? Find the white guy, 6 black men, and 1 white man are blindfolded and they have to tell who the white guy is. I did not. Did they get it right? I bet they got it right, didn't they? I didn't see it. I'm going to look that up later, AD. Victor doesn't like IPAs either. I would just dump it out and pour a new beer. Well, Peter, you're allowed to drink IPAs. I'm not saying I'm not saying I want to outlaw IPAs or anything. I would just really appreciate it if craft beer stores would start carrying more beer than like IPAs, because it's like you go into the craft beer store and it's like 75% IPAs and then every other kind of beer in the remainder 25%. And I just think it should be a little bit more balanced. A lot of people don't like IPAs, all right. We're not saying you can't have your IPA. But Nick, consequences of your actions. Yeah. I mean, I'll drink a little bit and we'll see. Okay. Let me see. It's not awful. It's not as bitter to the taste as it is to the smell. So it's not awful. I'm going to give it a couple more sips. I might finish it. but I do think that the lactose that they put in it, I can't taste cinnamon or anything like that, like it claims it has on the can. But I do think that the lactose like cut the bitterness quite a bit. Hang on. Yep, I mean, it's not as bitter to the taste as it is to the smell. So maybe I'll be able to finish it. We'll give it another try. I'm trying not to make a face or anything. But guys, let's get into our part 2 here. And let's see. It doesn't really give it a description. So we're going to have to find out what queer studies, liberatory education, and creative praxis is. Guys, mount that like button if you have not already. We're doing a double header today. Let's take this away.
Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Kristen LaFollette. I'm an assistant professor here at USI in the English department, and I teach for gender studies as well. And I'm really excited. Thank you so much for coming to our second installment of our Queer Studies lecture series today. I'm looking forward to introducing our speaker, but first I wanted to just remind everyone that we are offering our first Queer Studies course in the spring. So the spring 2022 schedule is live, and the course is listed right now as GNDR 100X. And it will be offered on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11. And I'm really excited to teach this class, and we'd love to have you.
Can I tell you guys about the best college class semester that I had as an undergraduate? I'm still really proud of myself for this. It's like it's 20 effing years later. It's quite literally 20 years later from when I created this college schedule. And I am so proud of myself for doing it. It was either like I think it was either the second semester of my junior year or the first semester of my senior year of college. Here was my college schedule. And all the classes were legit, and I needed them all for my major, which was communications. I had Mondays and Fridays off. On Tuesdays, I did not on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I didn't start class until 12:30. And I think I had like a couple of classes like on each of those days. On Wednesdays, the only class I had on Wednesday was 6 to 9 p.m. at night, and it was a once a week class. And then on Thursday, I had the classes that started at 12:30, and then there was another one right after that, and then I had an afternoon class of 4 to 7, which was only one class a week. So that was my schedule for I was so effing proud of this schedule. And one of the classes I was taking was children's literature. I shit you not. I had to read The Giver in college. That's how I read it. I read children's literature and I analyzed children's literature. That counted as an English class. Who knew? And so I just have to brag about this. 20 years later, still the best college schedule ever. Monday and Friday off. I had a 4-day weekend every single week. And there was not a single class before 12:30 in the afternoon. I'm just saying, come on. You got to have respect for that. All right, let's continue.
So if you have any questions about the course or the gender studies program, feel free to contact me or Dr. Denise Lynn, who's the director of our gender studies program. So the talk today will be followed up with a
I'll get the bingo card, Beth. Don't worry about it.
If you have questions, be sure to post them in the Q&A area here on Zoom. So, okay, all right, now to introduce
There's
our
the bingo
speaker
card
for
in the chat.
today. I'm very excited to have Dr. Mel Michelle Lewis joining us. They are the program director of the Ecosystems, Sustainability, and Justice Program, and the faculty lead grants project director for the Natural Dye Initiative at Maryland Institute College of Art. And in addition to these roles, Dr. Mel is also associate professor of gender, sexuality, and Black and ethnic studies in the Humanistic Studies Department, and co-founder of the Space for Creative Black Imagination and Interdisciplinary Research and Making Institute at MICA. Their personal, professional, and political commitments are to Black and Indigenous people of color and overlapping and interlocking
a college
queer,
professor
trans,
talking about
non-binary,
political
intersex,
commitments
and feminist communities pursuing social and environmental justice.
Who would have thunk it?
Originally from Bayou La Battery, Alabama, their creative work explores queer of color themes in rural coastal settings.
Dr. Mel is a collaborator, DEI consultant with the Art of Change Agency, supporting critical voices and creative visions for sustainable practice, structural change, and social transformation within organizations, institutions, and communities. They also serve on the Baltimore City LGBTQ Commission and as the Women's Studies Quarterly Journal Arts Editor. So without further ado, I'm happy to welcome Dr. Mel Michelle Lewis.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be with you. This is an exciting series, so it's wonderful to be invited to share a little bit about my work and have a conversation with you. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, if I can be allowed to do so.
She doesn't look like a they.
While we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and give our land acknowledgement.
Oh!
I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live. I recognize their continuing connection to land, water, and community. I acknowledge
She
that
doesn't
my
even
home
know
and
the
place of
traditional
work are
custodians.
situated in the Maryland region now called Baltimore, on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Piscataway,
Oh,
the
there it is.
Lenape, and the Susquehanna indigenous peoples.
You guys didn't
I
think we were
honor
getting
all
out of this without a
traditional
land blessing,
custodians
did you?
of
Come
this
on, there's
region.
always a land blessing.
I pay respect to the enslaved Afro-descendants who tilled and labored on this land, who were brought,
It's a very
sold,
serious land
and
blessing.
self-emancipated on this land. I recognize the continuing struggle for
This
liberation
is a true
in
believer right
Baltimore's
here.
Black community.
This is a true believer,
I
mark
acknowledge
this.
settler
Probably a black
colonialism
feminist
and
too.
enslavement,
Oh, we're in
as
for a
well
treat,
as
guys.
resistance and resilience. I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Thank you. So I'm going to read one of my creative works from biomythology. It's called Biomythography by You. And this particular biomythology is a piece that appears in one of my forthcoming manuscripts. I'm excited to share some of this work with you. And it's called Catfish Mardi Gras Queen.
We did have that
So we'll
45-minute
work on
land
this
blessing.
piece
That was a real
first,
thing.
and
That
then
was
we'll come
awful.
back and see
It just
about
kept going.
commentary. So this is
It was at least
Catfish
half an
Mardi
hour
Gras
long. That's
Queen.
not a joke.
You just like your daddy.
Oh.
This said and meant all kind of ways. Section 1, relations. They call me Junior, even though I got a brother. He go by Dubois. He call me Junior too. Dubois is a blue heron, is regal and ready for Mardi Gras. He slick his hair and shine his shoes. He's slow and pretty. He go out clean and come back clean. He's still and sharp. He like to see and be seen. He like to look, but don't touch. Dubois don't like no trouble. Eyes a steady oak tree. Eyes brown and green and taut. Eyes fixed and fine. I come and go with ghosts. Eyes magic familiar. Eyes Spanish moss in the breeze.
Does anyone else find the accent a little bit like offensive? Like, it's obviously not her accent. I understand she's doing a Cajun, like Louisiana, like Bayou thing. I get it, but like, it feels like it feels performative to me, is what I'm saying.
I ain't no lady. Ladies talk. They just say I'm trouble. They just say, girl, you better come give me some sugar. They just say, you just like your daddy. Part 2, lady friends. Tain't nothing wrong with lady friends. Folks around here know Miss Isidore and Ma Chevry all their life. Red got a lady friend in town now too. Tain't nobody this way seen who it is yet, except Dubose, and he ain't said nothing. He let Red drive his Cadillac. He let Red wear his sports coats. She careful and fill up the tank. She shine the rims and the windows. She dry clean his jackets. They both good at being friends and keeping confidence. Dubose don't like no trouble.
This is it. This is
Take
fire.
nothing wrong with
This
lady
is
friends.
this is what I find offensive. File Coral, thank you for putting words in my, because I could not place why I found this offensive. She's playing Mammy. Are you? Is it like a reclamation of Mammy? I don't get it. I really don't.
Friends. Ma Chevry can fix on your boat for a Sunday dinner plate. Clean your catch for a jar of fresh lemonade. Repair a cast net for a pecan pie. She just like her daddy, Captain Chevry. Everybody know about that. Ma Chevry's lady friends is Miss Isidore. She sew gowns and drink wine, sing French and drink wine, garden flowers and drink wine, pray rosary and drink wine, do hair and drink wine, root work and drink wine, make love and drink wine. But she don't cook nothing for nobody. Everybody know about that. Miss Isidore looking real good for her age. She sure like to flirt. When Ma Chevry out fishing, she say, I's a handsome woman. I's just like my daddy. Miss Isidore like women and like mules, seasoned and dependable. I ain't neither yet. Everybody know about that. Miss Isidore love Ma Chevry. Miss Isidore love her mules too, especially the one her daddy gave her. Black Magic Isidore been dead at least 40 years. The mule, an old good boy. His name been Marion Anderson since the first day. He don't
This makes me
mind
feel
one
really
bit.
uncomfortable.
Miss Isidore
I agree with you,
loved Ma
Shauna.
Chevry and Marion Anderson. She called them both Ma with the same tenderness.
I don't like it.
She loved them more than she could say to them or about them. Everybody know about that. Part 3, Mardi Gras Kitchen. Miss Isidore, Dauphine, and the ladies carrying on in the kitchen, sewing gowns and pressing hair, kings and queens and courts and parades.
Oh, I thought I had.
Balls
Sorry.
all weekend, mass on
There you go.
Sunday, Mardi Gras gumbo, king cake
My
on
bad.
Tuesday. I ain't about to go nowhere dressed up like the Pope. I was just like my daddy. He don't go nowhere for nothing, except to visit lady friends, except a repast after
This
the
shouldn't be the
funeral
whole thing.
of somebody humble.
This is like when we had sometimes guys, we get fun surprises on happy hour. This reminds me a lot of the time we had to sit through, I'm not kidding, a 30-minute land blessing with slides. There was an effing history lesson. And it wasn't like the presentation itself was like about trans people or something like that. It had nothing to do with the land blessing at all. But we had to sit through a goddamn history lesson about the land with like at least 15 effing slides before we got to the actual presentation. So I'm sorry. This just happens on happy hour sometimes, where they go on these weird tangents and they do weird things, but they should be transitioning into actual content at some point. When she's done playing Mammy, which I'm sure I'll get accused of being racist for saying, but I really think like she's channeling Mammy, which sounds racist to me in and of itself. I don't know why she wants to perpetuate the Mammy stereotype, but okay.
The blessing of the shrimp fleet. I ain't thinking about nobody's Mardi Gras, except maybe
Remember,
thinking up under Dauphine.
This is for a college class at the University of Southern Indiana. Your kids, if they are in college, are sitting through shit like this on your dime.
Gown she gonna wear, but moss and salt water and hurricanes under her slip. Don't nobody ask me what I know about that. Ladies primping and fussing, can't find the parasol in the closet. Miss Tillman say it better not be in the tool shed with the fishing tackle and umbrellas. Mama dear get worked up. She say parasol ain't no umbrella. She like to see my daddy walking round in the rain with all that lace trim she put on it. They all fall out laughing. Miss Isidore even spilled half her wine down her bosom. Mama dear can hear in her left ear a little, if she can get a joke in on my daddy. Even though she don't hear nothing, she don't want
I'm
to
gonna
hear.
watch Gone with the Wind after this. I'm not
I
even
ain't
lying.
going in the kitchen. They're gonna poke fun and try to get me up in a gown just to see if I'm as pretty as I am handsome. They know it ain't right. Dolphine can just tell
I'll tell
them.
you what.
Yeah.
Mammy in Gone with the Wind would have none of this. Mammy in Gone with the Wind would have put a stop to this like 15 effing minutes ago. She wouldn't have put up with any of this.
Yes, because she know about
Mammy
that.
would have told them right where to go.
Part 4, Dolphine. I'll whisper to Dolphine through the screen back door, latched with a hook from the inside. Psst, pass me some moon pies off the counter. She stuck her teeth at me. She rolled her eyes. She latched herself with a hook from the inside. I ask, please. I say, I'm sorry. I mean it. She blushed. She winked. She grinned. She put her hands on her hips. She unlatched the door. She unlatched her smile. She tell me, go check on them crab traps she put down in the bayou with chicken necks this morning. She gave me some half-melted moon pies out her pocket. She latched the screen door back. She latched her lips back. She turned her back, but don't walk away. We still feeling through the screen.
Yep, King Peter actually has a
Part
really good
5.
chat right now. King Peter, the chat says, it is performative. She's speaking Black to disrupt the system because they see being academic as adopting the dominant white culture. That's exactly right, King Peter. I agree. Well, they did try to ban Gone with the Wind, but guys, if you've never seen Gone with the Wind is a classic. You have to see Gone with the Wind. Come on.
Miss Katrina. Ayo, I got us the moon pies, Miss Katrina. I yell out to the bayou. Now, don't nobody think catfish can hear you talking. That's just because they ain't tried talking to them. Catfish got ears about like ours,
Babushka, grandmother.
and plenty sense too. Ayo, Miss Katrina come out the mud slow. She swim to me and lift the fin on her back. She float on her side and look at me with her two little blue eyes.
Hattie McDaniel played
The
Mammy
same
in Gone with the Wind.
small,
First
two
Black
little
woman to win
blue
an
eye
Oscar.
Miss Tillman's tubby brown baby got. Everybody know about that. Miss Katrina keep me company while I pull the traps and see what crabs we got to put in the Mardi Gras gumbo. They still dancing and fiddling and pinching each other over what left of the chicken necks. Miss Katrina eat everything except what's on a hook, and Miss Valerie's potato salad.
What the hell is
just
this?
like anybody that got sense. Once I gave her some on.
This is starting to remind me, and I hate to bring up this memory. I really do, because I know that this is something that a lot of people that are regulars on my channel don't want to think about. But this is starting to remind me of that time when we watched the NYU theater program website about them putting a play together that was about disrupting traditional gender roles. And they basically, and I kid you not, for people who are new here, this is a real thing. They kidnapped senior citizens from an old folks home and made them participate in a play where they did several different skits about senior citizens playing different characters like cats and tigers and fairies and gremlins and like New York lawyers and all this stuff to disrupt traditional gender roles. It was the most disturbing thing I've ever watched on this channel, and this is starting to remind me of that, and I don't like it. It was a mistake. Mistakes were made, okay? We watched senior abuse on my channel, and it was on NYU's theater program YouTube page. It was so bad. Oh, God.
On a spoon just to see. Miss Katrina spat, went back in the mud over that. She ain't come out till I give her a 1/4 pound of baked shrimp to apologize. I named her after the storm when the bayou changed. That's when she came to stay in the bend in our yard. She is big and the color of Mama Dia's thigh, with a housecoat hiked up high in the afternoon heat. I sink down in the bayou, open the moon pie wrappers.
I felt dirty
Let
too.
me see, Miss
I
Katrina.
did. I was
You
hiding,
like
I think, for
marshmallow,
most of it.
chocolate,
I was like
vanilla?
doing this.
Miss Katrina, Catfish Mardi Gras queen. She liked chocolate moon pie too.
Moon pies are delicious. We can all
Miss
agree on
Katrina
that.
make kisses
I
at me.
hope.
She got long whiskers
You can go get
like
some moon pies
Granddaddy
at the
Bo,
Cracker Barrel.
like the photo in the foyer. And bout as friendly. No teeth in they smile. Miss Katrina got on red lipstick, like what my daddy got on him when he come home after kissing, and he don't know about it. Eyes just like my daddy. This said and meant all kind of ways. Thank you.
Oh, finally, thank God.
Exciting to share a creative piece to start. And now we'll talk a little bit about queer studies, liberatory education,
Oh, good.
and creative praxis. Great. There we are. And present. There we go. So I'll begin here. So in this talk, queer memory is one of the things that I find really inspiring for my creative praxis. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll tell you a story about my background and coming into my voice as a queer writer. We'll talk a little bit about liberatory education and some of the works
She considers
that really
herself queer.
have inspired
Holy
me,
shit.
both scholarly and creative. And then I'll do just one more reading, and then we'll open it up.
Hang on, Miss Kara's asking a question. Sorry, this is off topic. You don't have to answer, but do you use just one thing like StreamYard? Yeah, I use StreamYard. StreamYard is the best. I mean, I've also used Restream before, and I know a lot of people who use it, but it's just like the easiest way to do it. And I need something that is like, I mean, stupid proof because I don't know how to use technology anymore. So StreamYard does a pretty good job. And StreamYard's really improving. They make improvements to it all the time. So 2 thumbs up for StreamYard, or 1 thumb because I'm holding my knitting.
For Q&A. So I'm from Bilobatry, Alabama. And if you've seen Forrest Gump, you may know Bubba Gump, popcorn shrimp, barbecue shrimp. It's the real town.
Now I want
Alabama.
barbecue shrimp.
The movie was not filmed there, but this is the space and place from which I come, and that has inspired me in my work. I am a Bayou princess in many ways. And I was raised with a Black Catholic Creole family in various traditions that are really an inspiration as I work on my own creative pieces. Mardi Gras features often, foodways and culture feature often, and even themes of Catholicism and religion feature in my work. So I'll tell you how I became a queer studies scholar. On a Saturday in Alabama in 1995, I was maybe I guess I would have been in high school, maybe sophomore year. I went to ballet class, and then I really had sort of an epiphany. I understood myself and
I understood. I was a lesbian
and choreographers as gay, and that was the terminology and the identity
Who
at
called
the time. And I had like a light bulb moment. Aha! This is something I would like to explore further in a scholarly sense. The first thing I wanted to do was go to the library. So I came home from ballet.
I realized that I really liked girls, and I concluded that the next thing I needed to do was to pursue an academic career studying queer studies. Crazy.
I went to my parents' room and I told them, I'm gonna probably go fishing or check a crab trap. I'm gonna run to the library because I'm gay and I need to look it up, and I'll be back by dinner. And off I went. So as I went to the library and wanted to explore this further, as I said, it was Alabama in 1995. So I went to the card catalog, and this was my first moment as a queer studies researcher. We didn't have Google, we didn't have Google Scholar, we weren't able to even have a digital catalog. So I really went to the card catalog. It looks something like this if you've never seen one. And I was looking up the word gay, G-A-Y, card catalog. It said gay, see homosexuality. Okay, pulled another drawer. And the two books that I found in 1995 in Alabama in the card catalog were an older book that was the Gay Yellow Pages, which I'm not sure what date the one that I found was, but here's an image of one from the 1970s. It wasn't contemporary, so it probably was around this time. And then I found a new book, and it was called Virtually Normal, an argument about homosexuality by Andrew Sullivan, and it was brand new. And these were the first texts that I ever encountered. One that showed me very explicitly that there were communities and cultures and all kinds of events and opportunities to connect with folks in a gay and lesbian community, which was the identifier on the material and the language and identifier of the time that I was researching. And then in Virtually Normal, this argument about homosexuality, as the term was being used in this text, was really an exploration of civil rights, arguing that the military don't ask, don't tell, and also calling for marriage equality, that these were things that should be pursued as civil rights.
So I want to make a point here, because in 1995, she went to the library to find out what it meant to be gay because she was discovering that she was gay. Okay, nothing wrong with any of that. The two books that she found were leftist perspectives on what it means to be gay. And that's because in 1995, and I'm old enough to remember this, the Republicans and the political right were completely opposed to all homosexuality in all its forms. They demonized everyone who was gay. They damned them to hell. They prayed for them to be saved, all that. And so the only resources these people had when they realized, oh, I like girls or I like boys or whatever, came from the left. You had two things to pick from. And I bet other people in the 90s remember this too. No, they weren't radical moderate. No, 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 no. 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 Just because Clinton implemented Don't Ask, Don't Tell does not mean that Democrats were as opposed to the gays as Republicans. You guys want to argue this all you want, but in the 90s, you had the far left that were... Okay. Here is where Republicans are going to try to make excuses for themselves and conservatives are going to try to make excuses for themselves. No. I'm shutting that shit down right now. In the 90s, you had the far left who was completely okay with people being gay. You had Democrats who couldn't politically make the argument at that point. But I promise you, well, then you don't remember accurately. If you truly, I'm sorry, okay, I'm going to say this. If you truly think that Republicans and Democrats were the same on gay issues in the 90s, you are either lying to yourself or you are retarded. There is no universe. No universe at all. If and maybe you weren't actually involved with the Democratic Party, so you don't know. There is no universe in which the political right and the political left were on the same page in regards to homosexuals in the 90s. Republicans were so much worse. It is not even close. It is in another fucking universe of worse, okay? Many people on the political left didn't really care. And I know this because I was the very first political issue that I ever got involved with in high school was civil unions in Vermont, which is the precursor to gay marriage. Most people on the left were completely fine with gay people. This is what drove me into the arms of the Democratic Party in the first place. Because I don't care if people are gay. Most people on the left were completely okay with gay people. They wanted gay marriage to be a thing. It was not politically tenable because fucking Republicans were homophobic off the charts. Off the charts. Next level homophobic. So the point I'm trying to make is that the only resources in the 90s for people who were gay were written by the far left. Because if they took resources from the right, it would have been damning them to hell, calling them horrible people, doing everything they could to try to exercise conversion therapy. So, do you guys know how you create an entire generation of Marxist queer studies professors? You give them one perspective on what being gay means. Okay? Do you want to know how an entire generation of Marxist queer studies professors were created? They were created in the 90s when they went to the library to find out what it meant to be gay, and the only books that were available to them were written by far leftists. That's how it happened, guys. That is the lesson. And I'll tell you what, Republicans today, conservatives today, are getting more and more and more and more and more homophobic every single day because they're backlashing against the trans stuff. We are in a moral majority part 2, and it is only going to strengthen this. It is only going to make this stronger. It is only going to create more Marxist queer studies professors that are going to teach your little darlings when your little darlings go to college. The right hasn't evolved on this. Maybe some people have, but not enough because they're all regressing right now. We can see it happening before our very eyes. It's been happening for 2 years. So that's what happens, guys, when you legislate your religion, when you lead with your religion. That's what happens. You create an entire generation of people who are fundamentally diametrically opposed to you because you've given them no resource. You've given them nothing to work with.
Rights matters. So I decided to go to college and study these things. So I ended up going to Goucher College in 1998, and I began studying women's studies and sociology to better get a handle on this information and also really understand my own experience.
God.
And in doing so,
just generally speaking, it drives me effing crazy that conservatives refuse to admit that the mistakes that they made in the 90s have resulted in all of us suffering and all of us losing the culture war because of mistakes that conservatives made in the 80s and the 90s in regards to the moral majority and trying to force their religion onto all of us. And conservatives refuse to fucking acknowledge this. They refuse to accept responsibility for this. They say, Democrats did it too, Carlin. Tipper Gore, Tipper Gore, Tipper Gore. Do you remember Tipper Gore? Tipper Gore. No, and then they refuse to acknowledge the role that all of them played in it. It is mind-boggling. I want to thank Mary on Rockfin for the $5 tip. Thank you, Mary. Mary says, in the 90s, GOP and conservatives endorsed family values, so that was different from the left, but why isn't that okay? We can't all believe in Bohemian Greenwich Village party lifestyle. I don't believe in that. You're allowed to endorse whatever you want. That's not the point. You are allowed to endorse whatever you want. But there's a difference between saying, I believe in family values and this, that, and the other thing, and trying to force your religion onto other people. There is a difference. There is a difference. Well, you can have feelings about it if you want, but to be honest, you were talking instead of listening and saying things that were grossly wrong. So I promise you, if you don't say things that are grossly wrong and then get all up in your feelings about me telling you you are grossly wrong, then you won't get called a retard. I'm sorry. Like, I don't apologize. I mean, listen, if nothing else on this channel, we are going to exist in the realm of reality. And the reality is that the moral majority in the late 80s and the 90s pushed a lot of people like me, partially because of the gay issue, into being Democrats. And you're still not admitting that you're wrong when you provably are, when most of the people in the chat say you are. So, well, you don't have to apologize. I don't really care if you do or not. But when you're wrong, I'm going to tell you you're wrong, and that's just going to be the way it is. Mark says, Kenneth Starr, I think you mean Kenneth Starr, special counsel went after Bill Clinton for having sex with an intern. Before that, he and Newt Gingrich were making headway for real reform in our government. I mean, wouldn't have that been nice? Wouldn't that have been nice if they had actually accomplished anything of value? Oh, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. And the fact that okay, time out for you. Still whining. Someone is still whining about the Kinsey discussion from earlier because they were proven wrong in the Kinsey discussion from earlier. And so Sisyphon Journal has broken the no whining rule, and they can go think about that for 5 minutes. There are so many problems and so many things that could be in a much better position right now if conservatives would just admit and acknowledge that the mistakes made in the 90s by trying to legislate their religious values have completely fucked us beyond all effing repair. Because now they're trying to do the same thing all over again. No, we cannot get back to the presentation until I'm done talking, because this is my channel and I'll do what I want. If conservatives do not stop with the legislation of their effing religious values and trying to force their religious values onto everyone, then we are going to lose, and it will not even be close. That is the culture war. You will lose your children. You will lose everything, all because you couldn't stop trying to push your religion onto other people. There is no universe in which social conservatism is ever going to take hold in this country. No universe at all. And in the meantime of trying to continue to push your social conservatism onto everyone else, you are losing every other fucking battle. It is infuriating to be able to see this clearly, to be able to watch conservatives deflect and deflect and deflect and deny and deny and deny, and to make shit up that has no basis in reality at all, because they don't want to admit that legislating your religious values is not going to work. It is never going to work. If you want to practice your religious values in your home, no one is denying your ability to do that. The problem is when you try to force it on everyone else. Randy, in the 90s, the right was the party of censorship and authoritarian rule. That's exactly correct. And you guys can scream Tipper Gore, Tipper Gore, Tipper Gore all you want. But that does not obfuscate your responsibility. Conservatives started cancel culture in the effing first place. And if they took time to go back and say, yeah, okay, mistakes were made, and acknowledge their role in causing the effing problem in the first place, then maybe things could be different. But no, they refuse to do that, so they repeat the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again. It is infuriating.
I really was immersed in what was being called and starting to be called queer culture at that time. And I was really excited to shave my head and get some really
You
great
guys
combat
censored
boots,
playing
and
cards.
this was the aesthetic of the time, and it was fabulous.
I still get people who comment on the channel every single week when I have Joshua on Tuesdays every single week. Oh, you're worshiping the devil. Tarot cards. Why do you have tarot cards? Why are you worshiping every single fucking week? And it's like, you learn nothing. All right, we're going back to the presentation now. I have said all I have to say.
While I was at Goucher, I had the honor of studying with Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas. And Dr. Brown Douglas
See, look
is
at this,
now
Black
the
feminist
dean
told
of the
you.
Episcopal Divinity School at Union Theological Seminary. And at the time, she was the program director of the religion department, and also taught in the Africana Studies minor, both of which I was exploring in my college curriculum. And the texts that Dr. Brown Douglas was writing and publishing, and the topics that we were exploring in the class, were really about sexuality in the Black church and the Black body from a womanist perspective. So I was immersed in these conversations about sexuality, Black feminism, womanist thought, and even theological studies. I was really and continue to be very inspired by my mentor. So some of my undergraduate readings were Zami, so a new spelling of my name, and this is a biomythography by Audre Lorde. And as you see in my own text, I still use this as a framework for writing my own narratives. The biomythography format from this text that I began studying in undergraduate still is very inspirational to me, as is Audre Lorde. Second, I was really interested in reading a lot of short stories, as well as scholarly kind of research materials, looking at Black lesbians and Black lesbian life. So the Afriquite anthology, as well as the Does Your Mama Know?
You're right. Vermont was the first state to allow it, and I was campaigning for it and knocking on doors for it. And do you know how many death threats I got from conservatives, from the good God-fearing conservatives, when I did that when I was 17 fucking years old? You think I don't remember getting the death threats from the good religious conservative Christians for knocking on doors and talking about civil unions in Vermont in the 90s? I remember it quite clearly. Thank you.
Anthology were two of the most interesting and texts that I could get my hands on, full of stories of all kinds of people from different perspectives, sharing all kinds of different both analysis and also personal narratives. So these were some of my really inspiring undergraduate queer studies frameworks, and these are all what we might say as the canon is starting to take shape for queer studies, specifically Black queer studies, all of these texts are a part of that canon. Then I went on to study at Towson University, and some of my graduate master's readings have also been really inspirational. At that time, there was a lot of discussion about public policy and civil rights around marriage equality, as I said before, as well as
all written by leftists.
discussions about the military and Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I also was learning more about other women of color radical writings. So this
Vermont just passed some sort of gun control bill this week. I don't know a lot about it, but I know they passed some sort of gun bill this week. So yeah, Vermont, the reason Vermont has a lot has had, I should say, really liberal gun laws is because there are a metric F ton of hunters in Vermont. My father was one of them. We had guns growing up in the house. I grew up in Vermont, for people who don't know. Like so my father had a whole bunch of hunting rifles in the house. We were very used to growing up around them. There are a metric F ton of hunters in Vermont. That's why they have the gun laws they have. But they just passed some sort of bill to restrict guns this week, and that's the direction they're going in. Fun times.
This bridge called my back was
Because they're ruled by Marxists now, but they weren't back then.
Text for me as well.
By the way,
and
Bill Clinton, 1992, Bill Clinton's election was the first time Vermont went blue in like a really long effing time. Vermont wasn't always as Marxist as it is now. When I was growing up, Vermont was like, it was starting to shift blue. It didn't fully shift blue until later.
Still write about that particular anthology now. And finally, virtual equality. And this was actually a text that was a contemporary to the Andrew Sullivan text that I found in the library in the 90s, but I wasn't familiar with it at the time. So I began reading some of these public policy elements, and I decided to do a concentration.
I don't think Muslims reacting badly is a reason either, Mary. I don't think that's good either.
How does that fit within queer studies alongside?
I'm not sure why we think I'm defending Muslims now over on Rockfin.
Creative work. And then in 2005, I started my PhD program at the University of Maryland. And that year, the critical anthology Black Queer Studies was published by E. Patrick Johnson and May Henderson. And that anthology held many texts that were both interrogating the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality, and that were doing both critical studies in terms of culture and political inquiries. So I was able to actually take a class with this text at the center, and I was so...
Well, I hope that Maj actually comes to Pork Fest. Because I heard a rumor that he was supposed to be disinvited, but then maybe he wasn't going to be disinvited, but then maybe he was. I don't know the outcome of that yet. I hope he comes. I really do. I would like to see him in person. But the shit on Twitter is like beyond.
Overwhelmed knowing that Black queer studies was a thing, that this was actually a field.
Dennis, did Dennis say that in the last couple days?
And
like, did he confirm it like today or yesterday?
Yes, this is absolutely not only
I hope he did.
What I want to study, but also what I want to teach. I want to become a professor in Black queer studies and be able to share this material with others. During my graduate studies, I was reading things like Disidentifications by Jose.
So essentially, and I'm sorry for people who don't know what's going on, I don't want to explain it, but essentially things escalated, and I'm not sure if that's still true. I hope it is. I really do. But I heard a rumor that maybe it wasn't going to be true. But he's still on the schedule last I checked, so I don't know.
Munoz, and also Aberrations in Black, Rod Ferguson. And these materials were really helping me to understand new discussions and discourses in queer studies, specifically with the lens of race and Blackness.
Again,
both from a cultural perspective.
What I want you guys to take from the story that she's telling right now, which is really unnecessary in the course of this overall presentation, but they love to talk about themselves. She went from finding leftist books to finding more extreme leftist books to finding even more extreme leftist books. It's like if she hadn't had the entry point of only having information from leftists at the beginning, she maybe could have gone in a completely different direction. But the leftist books were the gateway into more leftist books, and then more leftist books, and then more leftist books, and then more leftist books. Exactly. She went down the leftist rabbit hole because that was the only community who was creating the information that she was looking for.
And thinking about the politics of Black bodies. And I also was really exploring pedagogy and teaching and freedom in terms of how education about these materials might be shaped. So I was also really inspired by Teaching to Transgress and lots of work by bell hooks, thinking about teaching and pedagogy. Since this was my my desire to become faculty and be able to teach these materials and research and publish on them. And here are some of my glorious
Maj is still on the Pork Fest schedule as of right
from
now.
my program at Maryland, and we all
I hope he
are,
comes. I really do.
continuing to explore in our subject areas from our studies at Maryland. So as I was studying and gaining all of these credentials and becoming faculty and going all the way through tenure and publishing articles and chapters, I really still had this yearning for the creative work. And I wanted to really piece together creative work that spoke to my background, my community, but also was a part of the Black queer studies conversation. So here I just have my artist statement, and I'll share one more selection from Bayou Mythography Bayou. And as you reflect on the previous piece, the first one I read, think a little bit about how gender was explored and represented, how the story of family and community was put forward, and how some of the materials that I've just shared with you and their impact on me and my work may have shown up. And so I'll ask you to do the same thing for this last piece. So I'll stop sharing. All right. And this last piece is called Bayou Honeyman. Honeyman live freer than everybody
God,
else.
here we go again. Why?
Honeyman appear and disappear.
Why would you do
somewhere
this?
Between Satsuma and Criolla, between Monlewis Island and Bayou Codin. Don't nobody know which creek Honeyman live on, and ain't nobody going looking. Everybody think on what Honeyman do when they can't see what it is. Honeyman like a riverboat coming in and leaving out at the same time.
God,
Honeyman bring
why?
jars down the river, woven in a basket in the crook of Honeyman's arm. Honeyman a bee, round and sharp and spindly at the same time. Everybody like Honeyman sweet. Everybody wonder why they drawn to Honeyman when they can't think what it is. Honeyman walk slow and hum low. Everybody feel Honeyman's sound climbing round in their ribs. Bet like Honeyman. She run up a cloud of red clay. She like to be first to see Honeyman come round the river bend. Bet clap her hands and point her toes. She meet Honeyman on Chickasaw Creek and sit in the boat for a ways. Bet sing and talk at Honeyman. She sigh, she show her neck. Bet fold and unfold, rocking the boat side to side. She bring a few pieces of pie to taste. Honeyman like a slice of pie. George Waters.
Wait, did she just do a presentation that was like one of her creative readings that didn't make any sense, and then she talked about herself for close to 15 minutes, just like herself and her bio. And now she's doing another reading that doesn't make sense. And then we're going to go directly into the Q&A portion. Like, is that seriously the presentation? That's the presentation on liberatory education, is you're doing a creative reading that doesn't make sense, that you're channeling Mammy, you're talking about yourself for 15 minutes, and then you're doing another effing creative reading. Let's all please, dear, hope that there are questions. Wow. College level course. College level course. Remember that.
Like Honey Man. He take a jar out the basket.
You're
and
welcome,
blush.
Murphy's Pool.
George Waters stared deep at Honey Man, get low humming back.
Thank you.
George Waters sweat and fidget, get brave, invite Honey Man skinny dipping in the cold swimming hole. George Waters unscrew the honey top, stick his finger in the jar to taste. George Waters like a basted ham when Honey Man bring jars down the river. Honey Man like a basted ham. Honey Man love Letitia. She prop open her back door with a jug of whiskey when it rains. She play music and wait on the steps in her slip. Letitia braid and unbraid her hair. Letitia smoke tobacco in a pipe. Letitia walk around in high heel shoes and panties in the house. Letitia leave the windows open, except when Honey Man come.
Peter, you're right. King Peter is always right.
Letitia love Honey Man and a jug of whiskey.
It's not supposed to make sense.
I love Honey Man. I skip in a circle.
It's not queer if it makes sense.
I bounce. My dear call me, honey baby, you raising the dead with that racket. She threatened the cake in the oven we made for Honey Man.
I can't drink much more of this IPA, I'll tell you that.
My daddy Bo called me, honey baby, come sit still. He hand me a cool glass of water. He rocked me in the rocking chair with his foot. My daddy Bo love Honey Man, been looking out from the porch all day. My daddy Bo got to wait till just one jar left. My daddy Bo love a jar of honey. Honey Man come round the road, hum slow. I can feel Honey Man's hum between my shoulders. Honey Man like a riverboat coming in and leaving out the same time. My daddy Bo run to the road and take Honey Man's basket, take Honey Man's hand. I race, I jump, I cling. I hold Honey Man round the neck. I sit on Honey Man's hip. I look in Honey Man's mirror. I'm a bee, round and sharp and spindly at the same time. My dear called to me from the kitchen. Honey baby, fix your mama Honey Man a plate. Honey Man called me, honey baby. I saved the last jar of honey for you every time. Thank you. All right. Let's go into our Q&A.
Oh,
I'd love to
God.
invite discussion, questions.
That really is the entire
or comments.
presentation.
Thank you.
What the hell?
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. Much appreciated. Let's give everyone a chance to.
You know, there was some perfection to being the entire presentation. I told you, this is like NYU Film School where they kidnap the senior citizens all over again. It was queer liberating creativity. Wow. Okay, well, let's go into the Q&A. Maybe that will give us more information. Got about 20 minutes of that.
Start asking some questions. You can post those in the Q&A option we have
What a
available
riot.
here on Zoom, and I will be checking those. I think while people are posting some of their questions, maybe
What
it's okay
a
if I start by
riot.
asking a question that I have. I was wondering, just what is it like being a queer studies scholar at Maryland Institute College of Art? And like, what is that institution like? And what kind of programs do they have? And how do you see yourself as like a creative, critical scholar at MICA?
Oh, great question. Well, I feel in part because it's a art and design institution, MICA is very open and supportive of queer work and queer scholarship. There is certainly a focus on art and design in terms of studio majors and programs, and that's what all of the students and have come to the institution to study. But many also are very interested in gender and sexuality studies and queer theory. And I've been able to teach those courses and offer, there is a minor within the humanistic studies program where students have their studio major and then they're able to minor with an emphasis in gender and sexuality. So that's been really exciting for many students. I think folks are able to see both in terms of identity and their own personal experience, as well as artistic practice and scholarship practice, that there are multiple connections. Some students and faculty are very much activists, and they bring that foundation of knowledge around queer studies into their activist art. Other folks are very romantic in their exploration of their studio mediums and might bring queer work into those pieces. A lot of folks are playing with gender in terms of animation, for instance. Other folks are really thinking about queerness in the body, perhaps as sculpture artists. So there's a lot of overlap and integration, as well as support. And I've been at many different institutions, so that's not always the case in terms of that, that openness. But at MICA, I think because in part because there is such a vibrant community of openness and a community of care, that folks really are exploring these things, even if it's not their own identity or experience. They're able to really open up not only to the knowledge, but then apply it to their artistic practices. Yeah, thank you. Great question.
That's great. Thank you so much. We have one question that was posted. Someone said, thank you very much for being here. My question is, how would you personally define
It's
queer
very
studies?
narcissistic. It really is.
You know, I love this
It would be,
question.
I mean, to Peter's point, it would actually be interesting to like look this person up and see like what else they've done online, because it's like, it's extremely narcissistic to come in, to be asked to do a presentation about queer studies, and then to come in and to read your own like poetry, I guess, that isn't even related to the topic, and then to talk about yourself for 15 minutes and then to read more of your poetry that isn't related to the topic. And it's like there is some sort of like very, very narcissistic vibe about the whole thing, isn't there?
And I'm in part even defining what is queer, what is the term, what is the definition. In part, queerness and queer studies, just as it offers kind of a lens into exploring gender and sexuality among many different other intersections, it also is really built on the foundation of defying definition and defying kind of codification. So in some senses, I do think, you know, queer studies and that queer exploration is really being able to analyze gender and sexuality among many other intersections from a perspective that allows us to, you know, think outside of the norms in which we often are educated, whether that's around, you know, binaries and identity, whether that's around how power should be situated in communities and within a nation state. Those are all kinds of queer questions. So for me, queerness and queer studies is really boundless in many ways and defies
It has
definition.
no
Just
definition.
as
Queer
it does
studies has
speak
no
to
definition is the lesson that we are taking away
really
from this.
unpack and perhaps even transform society. Yeah, thank you. Great question. I appreciate that one.
Thank you. This next question is one that I would also love to hear your response for, because it's something that I struggle with myself as somebody who does creative and critical work. But how do you balance your creative writing time and your academic writing time?
Oh, it's so unbalanced. It really depends on the deadline for me. So sometimes I really want to follow my impetus when I'm feeling creative and take advantage of that moment. Yet, article is due that is very scholarly and has a particular research agenda attached to it. Or sometimes I'm really deep in the research and it's a moment where that creativity output is supposed to happen, and sometimes you just don't feel it, or you have your attention elsewhere. So I would say I haven't quite worked out the balance part of that, and I'm glad to hear that question and hear that affirmation from both of you, because I think most people who do both scholarly writing and creative work struggle in this way. But one thing that I have found is really bringing my creative work into my scholarship and my research materials. So in some cases, the reviewers have questions about your format and why does it sound like this? And it's much harder to do when you haven't had tenure, and if you're more junior, then it often there is an expectation that you follow a particular formula. And I wish liberation from all of us, but also understand that sometimes to have those publications move forward, they do have to follow a particular structure. But whether you explore other locations for publications, other placements, or you decide to have creative publications alongside your scholarship, I do encourage bringing that creative voice into even the most serious research paper that you have to publish. And certainly I speak from privilege, knowing that I don't have to publish in that way if I don't want to. And yet there still are questions from reviewers or journal editors to say, this is an interesting piece, but I don't know if it's a fit because this is very clearly a research special issue. But also being able to articulate why you chose that voice and why it has that creative aspect to it is another way to encourage editors to shift and change. And then the next person behind you that comes to publish or is grappling with this question of dueling writing styles might have an easier time because your format is there as an example, or an editor has experienced it. So again, I do try to really engage if I'm having that creative spirit moment, but it is very difficult depending on what you're supposed to be doing when, and I don't always get that that output in the way that I'd like. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I resonated with so much of that. Okay, we have a couple other questions here. So, all right, this is great. So this question, I just want to say that your pieces were beautiful, Dr. Lewis. I'm in the process of learning more about gender studies in general because I think it's a research area I'm very interested in. And though my focus is mainly in women's studies, I'm very curious about queer studies and want to learn more about it.
Oh, great.
Since you're a scholar whose concentration is mainly in this area, what do you think sets Black queer theory apart within the field of queer studies?
Oh, great.
Great question. Oh, thank you. And I'm excited for you to continue to explore these fields. And I will say, I understand them as interlocking, overlapping fields of study. Also thinking about the lineage of many of the scholars and creative folks who have contributed. you know, I in many ways feel like there aren't so many boundaries as we tend to use when we're saying this department is this, that department is that, or this scholarship is called queer studies. So in that sense, I think your explorations can always be queer. So if it's women's studies and there's a particular feminist analysis, there is a queer aspect to that. And if there is a queer studies inquiry that is looking at gender and sexuality, those conversations also are in women's studies in ways that are overlapping. And that's not to say that multiple fields don't conflict. In some instances they do, and there are border wars around
Thank you, philosophist. I appreciate it.
Political
Cheers to
aspects,
you.
inclusion, terminology, philosophy, but that's what academia is. And so I do tend to think more in terms of a solidarity model. But in terms of Black queer studies, I was so excited in 2005 to see this anthology, and it actually was born of a conference that wanted to very clearly focus on Black queer studies and the emergence of, you know, or recognition of, I say emergence, but recognition of multiple historical scholars, philosophers, artists, activists who have always been doing Black queer studies, who may have been known in their literary lives, but weren't necessarily known as what we would now call a queer scholar, or who may have been known as philosophers, but were not understood as queer theorists.
This woman
because
is
of race
pure
and
word
because of
salad.
gender and or sexuality
Pure
and queerness.
word
And so
salad.
there are ways in which Black queer theory is both kind of collapsing all of those borders in order to have that recognition for those who have come before us, who have been writing about this, and, you know, maybe writing, maybe storytelling, maybe making dance, for instance, if we think of Alvin Ailey, who all can come into that canon. I think part of the project of Black queer studies is to collapse down this idea that queerness is a very high theory scholarship based endeavor. And in many cases, the canon and or the initial conversations about forming queer studies was kind of really focusing in on that intellectual element and erasing some of those other pieces. So I think in part, Black queer studies emerging from that kind of conversation and coining of a field really did serve to bring in these other voices, specifically those with a Black perspective. So that's one element. And I do think it is recalling and calling the question on conversations in Black feminism and womanism that were already existing, that certainly were what we would now call Black queer studies or queer theory, but that weren't recognized as such, and maybe were, you know, adjacent to Africana studies and Black studies, and also were adjacent to women's studies and feminist theory as those borders were drawn. And now Black queer studies as almost one of the initiators of how we now use the term intersectionality is one of those engines that brings all of those conversations together, collapsing some of those borders and boundaries, while also really being able to hone in on those specific intersections when we're thinking about race, gender, and sexuality. Yeah, great question, thank you.
All right, so it looks like we have one more. Besides the resources that you have already mentioned, what recommendations do you have, both creative and critical, for someone wanting to further explore queerness or queer studies?
Super, oh yes. So I have lots and lots of ideas about resources. So that's one of my favorite things, is to think about what is the, you know, where is my inspiration? And then also where are the supportive works that help me to think through, you know, my own perspective and what it is that I'm trying to articulate and posit in my argument or in my creative work. So I really feel that sometimes I'm reading something that is really scholarly and that is well cited and has all of this analytical information, and I'm finding, oh, there's actually a character there for a creative work, or there's a scenario there for a creative work. And other times I'm really exploring creative writing, and whether that's fiction or poetry. And I find, that's a really interesting question that I would like to research further and perhaps have a particular thesis about. So sometimes that makes reading for pleasure really difficult. But I do actually love to pair those things. And I think a lot of other folks are doing that. And that's actually a great question for my final slide here. I'm going to just share screen one more time. And I will go full screen. You can see that there. So I put a more to read.
No one knows Fire
slide.
Coral.
And Bettina Judd,
No one
who's
knows.
one of my beloved colleagues and classmates from University of Maryland. Patient
That may
is
be
both,
Shuffler.
about Black women's health and healthcare, as well as a poetic exploration of gender and sexuality. Undrowned, Alexis Pauline Gomes is really exploring, Black feminism and marine mammals. And this is just, a science and ecology exploration that finds itself as a Black feminist narrative and Black feminist, theory partner. So these are kinds of works that are really exciting to me. And Yabo is a novella by Alexis Duvo, and it's really both historical fiction, thinking about Black communities in that are now underneath Central Park, and those that have kind of been explored, and there's an archaeologist in Yabo as a character, and that allows this kind of historical conversation to emerge, while also really exploring sexuality, the body, and identity through intersex and queer characters, with this overlay of race and racialization. So these are some examples that I have to offer in terms of work that allows us to engage both creatively and scholarly kind of researchy work at the same time. And that for me is the intellectual and kind of literary experience that I'm looking for. It's something that has all of those things together. And I'll also say I'm really into food writing right now, specifically by Black chefs. So Edna Lewis and some of her books that are certainly recipes, but also have a lot of historical information. Son of a Southern Chef, Michael Twitty's The Cooking Gene. There are all of these works out there that actually are mostly about cooking, but so that creative piece is
Cooking
there,
is
but
queer
there's so
now?
much historical
good.
analysis and elements of research embedded in each of those recipes, and the stories that are told about them are told in ways that are about personal narrative and memoir.
We're almost done, guys. This should be the last
that's another
question.
recommendation if you're looking for
This is so
texts that don't
beyond.
make you
I'm
separate
so sorry.
all of those things.
I'm sorry I
and
made you all
make
endure
really
this.
hungry.
This is crazy.
Yes, I like all of those things.
She doesn't even
Thank
know what the
you
fuck's
so
going
much,
on.
Dr. Lewis. Those are
Wow. Okay, I have to admit, I had no idea what to expect walking into that, but I want everyone to really understand that what we just watched was a presentation by the University of Southern Indiana all about their new queer studies program, in which we just spent 52 minutes and 24 seconds watching something that didn't make any godly sense. You know what? And in some respects, I'm happy that we watched it. Because this is exactly and precisely what your kids are experiencing in college. That is exactly correct. If you send your kids to college, this is what they're going to get. And not just if they're gender studies majors, all right? They now require this bullshit for every single course of study. How crazy is that? All right, guys, I don't have it in me to do a part 3 tonight. I'm sorry. There is actually a part 3 to this series. I will show it to you. We're not going to watch it. Don't worry. No one freak out. But there is actually a part 3 to this series called Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Exploring Queer Pop Culture. I can't do it, though. I can't. We've already gone too far. And I'm still upset over conservatives not taking responsibility for their part in throwing away the culture war in the 80s and the 90s. I'm still upset about it, all right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to pour out the rest of this IPA cuz I can't drink anymore. I drank like, a good third of it. It's just too much. It's too much better. It's better than most IPAs, I'll give it that. I just can't drink anymore, but I have 2 other beers here that are waiting for me, that are nice and cooled, that are calling my name. And I'm gonna go tend to those beers and possibly watch a movie of some sort, possibly a horror movie that will be less terrifying than what we just watched, and relax and kick off my weekend. But guys, as a reminder, for my paying supporters, if you are a member of this YouTube channel, if you are in my locals, if you are in my Patreon, or if you are a member of my Substack, we are doing Bitchcraft tomorrow at 3 p.m. This is a private Zoom where we bitch and we craft. I, of course, will be knitting as the far most superior of all craft, but you're welcome to do whatever craft you want, and you can come and join us for a chat. And then tomorrow at 6 p.m., we are doing Socialism Saturday. I don't know exactly what we're going to watch yet, but I've got some options. I'm picking them out. I'm being choosy, all right? But we're doing Socialism Saturday at 6 p.m. And then on Sunday, we're going to have a Socialism Sunday special, because Red May, our best friends, our new best friends at Red May, we are going to again watch their presentation, which is live at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday, which we don't normally stream on Sunday, but it's Red May, so we have to. And they are doing a presentation called We Have Never Been Post-Industrial. And so that will be on Sunday at 2 p.m. I'm really interested to see what they have to say about that. And of course, we're still going to be polite with Red May because, we don't want to be the ship posters. If they want to call us stupid on their live stream in front of everyone, that's their business, but we don't have to participate in that nonsense. Hi, Red May. Hi, Philip. Hi. They're going to love us after this. They really are. All right, guys, that's all I have for tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me for happy hour. We do this on Fridays at 5 p.m. Some nights it goes better than others. What can I say? But I'm going to go drink some beer and start the weekend, and I hope you do the same. Have a great time, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Bye.